to an environmental science group of individuals, all students in college up in New York City. And after spending time with 2 other participants speaking, those 8 students said they did not know that we had this much to offer in our profession. So we opened their eyes, but there's many more like them that are sitting out there, either in school, whether it be from high school, elementary, all the way through college, that are missing what we do as the love for the land. So I encourage you, I challenge you to find time to spend more time talking to others out there about who we are, why we do what we do, because the bottom line, we are here to protect our natural resources and engage our profession to go forward. With that, we have an awesome lineup today. So if you can put up the agenda for me, AJ, that would be very helpful. We love to also thank all of our speakers who have volunteered their time to be with us today. The lineup goes from about 8 o'clock, which is the kickoff now, all the way to our 12 o'clock, where I hope you got your lunch available, because we're going to transition straight into our business meeting. And for those that can stick around, we look forward to having you. For those that will be with us tomorrow, we're going to meet at Shank Forest, which is one of our properties under the college at the natural resources side of the business, and spend time doing a tour. We got our students and faculty that have engaged in a very good agenda for you. So if you can be with us tomorrow from 2 to 4, that'll be exciting. The other part of that is we plan to go and do a little celebration at Raleigh Brewing Company. So that should be around 4 to 5. So if you're in town, make time to be with us. And with that, I think I've spent time talking as much as I can. You can take a look at the agenda on your own time. But most importantly, let's turn it over to AJ to talk about some logistics.
Okay, so this webinar is going to offer continuing forestry education credits. And if you look at the chat function at the bottom of your screen, I'm going to drop a link into a Google document. You will need to click that link and fill in your information and send me a personal message if you have trouble getting to it. Let's see here. So we'll have time to revisit this throughout the session, and I'll post it up several times. So if you don't get it right away, don't fret. And if you don't get it at all before the end of the meeting, just shoot me an email and we'll make it right. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Adam Downing. He's the APSAF chair this year, and he's going to give us an update about the Centennial Meeting.
Thank you, AJ. Thank you, Sam. It is good to see a lot of familiar faces and names, and serving as your APSAF chair has been and continues to be a real honor. Thank you for the opportunity to grow in my own leadership and to serve you and to serve this profession. APSAF has been really busy. The leadership team, which encompasses the executive committee, has been meeting on a monthly basis. We've even met face-to-face one time at the cradle where the Centennial marker was placed a couple months ago. Hopefully you read about that in the last Trailblazer. It's going to be that and much more in the upcoming Trailblazer. I actually have the draft copy of it right here, which has one of the Centennial pictures on it. So there's going to be a lot in the upcoming Trailblazer, a lot of pages. Please take some time to go through it. One of the biggest things that we have been working on is a governance. And there's the article in.
No.
There's a governance article. There's an article in there about governance, one of the big issues we've been working with over the past year. Tom Davidson on this committee, Tony Doster, in this meeting, Tony Doster, Tom Davidson, and there are others, but I think those are the ones who have been involved in the process. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the business meeting, and there's a lot of this in the upcoming Trailblazer. It's going to improve some things, and it's just a number of things that we need to get done. We're an old organization, and there's some things that need to be changed to get us kind of in right standing with different entities. There is a leadership training coming up that is going to be in North Carolina in September. Stay tuned for that. The first Leadership Academy was held last year. It was all virtual. This one will be mostly face-to-face, and Tom is going to talk about that. It got really rave reviews last year, so it'll be even better with a face-to-face component this year. That's one of the things we can offer ourselves as members, is the opportunity to grow as leaders, and keep a broad perspective on what leadership is. You know, it starts with self, leading self well, and leading those, even if you're not in a leadership position, your colleagues, right? Even your family members. This transfers into all areas of life. So there's a lot more, but I don't want to list off everything that you'll be able to read here in a week or so on the Trailblazer. But please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the executive team if you have any questions, any concerns, any opportunities. Thank you, Tom. Anna's here too, and Patrick. Oh, sure. Thank you, Tom. I'll put that in a direct message to me. And Patrick, didn't see your names there. Didn't know if you're here or not. But we were talking about the governance committee, governance work. And Tony's going to talk about some of the specifics of this in the business meeting. So stick around for that, with some of kind of what difference is it going to make at the chapter level. And again, I think there's going to be some improvement there. So with that, in order to help keep you guys on time, I'll go ahead and stop. If there's any questions, I'll watch the chat and be happy to respond or verbally. Thanks, AJ. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks. And Pat, would you be willing to give an update about the Centennial Meeting?
Unmute myself. Okay, I'm Pat Straka. I'm the general chair for the 2022 Centennial Meeting. And it's so good to see a lot of North Carolina folks that I haven't seen in ages. You know, we are planning for an in-person meeting in Asheville, January 26th through 28th, 2022, at the DoubleTree down in Biltmore Village. And we are planning a Centennial meeting, an APSAF meeting like you've all never seen before. The three main goals of this meeting from the very get-go was it's going to be affordable to all the members. It's going to be memorable in a fun way and fun. We're going to have fun at this APSAF meeting. Everything about the meeting, the stuff that's happened so far, the stuff that's going to happen is going to be on the APSAF website, apsaf.org. Click events and then click Centennial 2022. The registration information, the hotel information will be appearing the end of August. But the information about the Centennial Stone and Tree video that Patrick Hiesel did and his committee, that's up there. Any students out there, if you're looking to give a poster or a flash presentation, there's information on how you sign up for that. That's on the APSAF website right now. Next week, there'll be a volunteer sign-up sheet. So if anybody's interested in volunteering at the meeting, and I know a lot of you folks have volunteered in the past, I hope you all come to Asheville and volunteer again. And last but not least, I really would like to thank the North Carolina members of the Planning Committee. NC State has been fabulous in helping us negotiate with the hotel and giving us a lot of support. Sam Cook, I don't know how he does it. He's got a real job. He's North Carolina Division Chair, and he's also the North Carolina fundraiser this year for the meeting. Krista Rogers is doing the student activities. Jamie Lewis is helping with the program. Joanne Cox is helping with the pre-conference workshops and tours. Kelly McCarter, she may be living in Florida, but her heart's still in North Carolina. She is our publicity and communications person. Colby Lambert is helping with a pre-conference workshop. And last but definitely not least, Orin Gore and Pisgah chapter are working their butts off and helping to make sure that this is a great meeting. If you all have any questions about the meeting, just put me on the chat, ask me something on the chat box or get in touch with me by phone or by email. Be glad to answer any questions you may have. And I hope to see you all in Asheville next January. Thanks. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, AJ.
No problem, Pat. Appreciate that. Really looking forward to that meeting, and we'll go ahead and drop the APSAF link that you were talking about in the chat as well.
Thanks.
So you guys should have also have seen the Google Doc link in there for CFEs. I'll continue to drop that in because as people drop off and as new people come in, they won't have access to it in the chat. So I'll just continue to put it up there. It's the same thing. You don't have to fill it out twice, but please be kind. I forgot to mention that earlier. You have all editing capabilities there, so please don't delete anybody's name. All right, so we are up for the first door prize, and this one is courtesy of Duke University, I believe. Yes, it is. All right, so what I have here is a list, an Excel file list. I will share it with you here. Screen 2. I have an Excel file list. Let's see here. Share. Okay. Y'all are seeing that now?
Yep.
Okay. So I have a list with everybody's name here. And if you're on, I want you to unmute or put in the chat saying I'm here, because you have to be present to win. And everyone's got a number. And we're going to use Excel ran between function. And we got 126 folks eligible for this. So we'll go ahead and hit enter and see who the winner is. 105. Okay. Our lucky winner is Cal Oakley, who is a Duke University student. How fitting. Congratulations, Cal. I know Cal is on the call here because he has to participate today. So congratulations, Cal. All right. Let's see. All right, so next up on our agenda here is Jacob Herr. He's going to go ahead and unmute himself and introduce our next two speakers. Go ahead and take it away, Jacob.
Hi, I'm Jacob Herr from the student chapter, NC State student chapter of SAF, and I'm here to introduce Dr. John Hatcher. Dr. John Hatcher is a certified forester and was named the NCFA's executive director in June of 2018. He leads the association's advocacy efforts with the North Carolina General Assembly, as well as interacting with federal and state regulatory agencies on issues that impact forestry, the forest product industry, and also private property rights. He holds a doctorate of philosophy in forestry resources, a Master of Science in Applied Economics and Statistics, and a Bachelor's of Science degree in Wildlife Fisheries Biology from Clemson University. And also, I will be introducing Yule Smith. He serves as the Executive Director of Carolina Loggers Association and as Vice President of the Business Development for the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities launching timberhauling.com. He served as the executive director of the Gulf Seafood Institute and the Louisiana Seafood Promotion and Marketing Board, and is a producer of the Great American Seafood Cook-Off seen on Food Network and PBS. He started his career in the wood business as a marketing manager for the Southern Forest Products Association, and he has a BS in psychology from LSU and MBA from the University of New Orleans, and is a graduate of the LSU Ag Leadership Development Program.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. John Hatcher here. Yule, are you on as well? Just for the sake of efficiency, how would you like to structure this?
I am, John. Sorry, I had to unmute.
That's okay. Do you want to let's cover federal stuff first, and
That's
we can
fine.
just kind of, okay, all right. You want to start off with logger relief, and then I can work
Sure,
transportation
sure.
and then get a state issue? Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jewel.
that'd be fine. Yeah, so as you all may be aware of, working with the state associations across the United States with loggers, North Carolina, Maine, and Minnesota, we led the way to secure a bill called logger relief, which ultimately led to Congress setting aside $200 million to provide relief to loggers who have been, hurt by coronavirus, the impact of their businesses. And we expect to see, there's a new executive director for the American Loggers Council. And in speaking with him and a letter that Senator Collins just sent to Secretary Vilsack, we expect to see those dollars, put it this way, they're starting to create press releases regarding the release of those dollars. It's the government, so who knows? But we do expect to see those dollars fairly soon to help our loggers across, not just North Carolina, but across the United States.
And I'll just follow up by saying, here recently, there was a release, I believe this week, Yule, that stated that they were going to bring the program online in July with informational webinars coming soon. So for those of you on the call this morning that have loggers that are very interested in that, please stay tuned, because we'll be releasing information just as soon as we receive it. I want to thank the chair and everyone for the time to talk. Like I mentioned earlier, we do have a transportation issue. I feel like I keep beating the same old drum, but when you work federal issues, that tends to happen. Currently, we've got about a dozen roads transitioning into the federal interstate system. For those of you in the business, you all know by now that will impact our 10,000 pound variance that we have for raw forest products on all state roads. So when you go to federal interstates, you drop down to 80,000 and you no longer have that up to 90,000. This has been an effort that's been worked on really by a village, North Carolina Farm Bureau. I can't recall the number of NCFA members and their federal consultants that have weighed in this issue, Loggers Association. We've done some joint advocacy efforts as well. Last Congress, Senator Burr was very successful in having language in the infrastructure bill coming out of the Environmental and Public Works Committee in the Senate. That bill was not taken up primarily due to COVID. Of course, leadership has changed in the Senate. He has requested that language. We have not seen a draft of the infrastructure bill on the Senate side yet. The Invest in America Act, the infrastructure bill introduced on the House side, currently does not have the language that we requested or Congressman Butterfield requested for us. We are hopeful. There are 3 or 4 more stops where we can have our language inserted with a group of amendments, which is far better than trying to introduce a standalone. We're looking at those pathways now. At the state level, probably the most important thing to many, Representative Strickland will be introducing a resolution commemorating the centennial anniversary of APSAF here within the next couple of weeks. Please be on the lookout for emails from myself or AJ, as I would like as many of y'all, if possible, to come that day that it's going to be read on the floor. Y'all are welcome to come sit in the gallery. Y'all will be recognized by the Speaker of the House, Tim Moore. Got several acts for the sake of efficiency. I'm not going to go into details, but we'll be happy to entertain questions after I introduce them. There are 2 bills germane to forestry that we're very interested in this year. Senate Bill 605, North Carolina Farm Act of 2021. It's an omnibus bill, contains many provisions, of which it contains some timber theft provisions that we've been supporting for the last 3 years. Also, House Bill 141, promote North Carolina sawmills. There again, another bill that the Forestry Association has been working on the last two sessions with the General Assembly on it. We've got it in a much better spot than we found it, and it currently lies in the Senate. Two bills that are kind of broad business bills that we are paying a lot of attention to due to the impact that they have on our members. House Bill 334, it was introduced as temporary line PPP treatment to federal treatment. The Senate decided to strip and amend it and essentially create an overall tax, pretty much a tax overhaul, job grants and tax relief. There's a lot of provisions in there that we're closely watching right now and weighing in on. And as of this morning, House Bill 951, study emerging energy generation. There was an article in the Charlotte Observer the other day on this. Been a lot of stakeholders working on this bill for quite some time. We have not gone over the bill entirely. It is rather lengthy. And for any of our wood processing facilities, could greatly impact their cost of business. It's just the beginning of it. We typically, when bills are introduced, they're never in their final form. So I'm sure we've got weeks of work with other stakeholders on this as well. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding legislation. I thank the chairs again. And I also wanted to mention before I leave, July 8th, the Forest Management Committee, NCFA's Forest Management Committee, will be hosting a virtual meeting. Part of it may be in person, but most of our speakers are going to be via Zoom, and the main theme is going to be carbon. I know back in 2005 to 2008 or thereabouts, major discussion on carbon. There was a pilot program on the Chicago Exchange. Currently, the NCFA does not have a formal position on carbon markets, and we are really in the due diligence phases because there are many programs being offered to landowners. So I just want to throw that out there if anyone is interested. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
John, this is Steve Weaver here in Murphy. When you first started, you were talking about the 1,000-pound, the 80,000-pound limit. Is there an exemption or as part of that for emergency hauling? I'm thinking about hurricane salvage and the needs of other things beyond the salvage for that or those efforts.
So the ultimate fix is grandfathering language. As far as salvage hauling goes, it's been frustrating for us working with emergency management in the governor's office because it's not as clear. They have made vast improvements in their last several executive orders. However, I don't know that we'll ever get past an increase on 90,000 pounds. It's a safety issue, and that really does come from the state's traffic engineer.
And that's what I was saying, because that's still another 10,000 pounds is substantial when you're trying to move stuff in a hurry. So anyway, thank you.
Well, and it does go back to the governor's power to waive something on a federal interstate, because if this was a state issue, if interstates were a state issue, number one, we'd have increased weight limits throughout the U.S. by now. But it's a federal issue, so it becomes a bit complex at that point. If you have any further questions, or if that wasn't clear enough, just please feel free to reach out to me, and I can clarify any questions you have.
Yeah, it was just if we have the authority, I know there's different governors and different states have been able to increase that beyond what they're able to do and working with their federal partners. And that was the basis of my question, is making sure that we still had that ability to request that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be approved, but when you're trying to move a lot of timber or move a lot of supplies in times of emergency, it's good to have that exemption. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'll piggyback. This is Yul again, and I want to thank AJ as well for inviting us to be part of this. I'll piggyback on that last comment as well. The American Loggers Council also has a federal approach they're working on, and they're changing their tact, I think some, which is good because their approach has not been successful the past few years, and they're going to be providing more support to the states, I believe. So that's something I think that will help our efforts here in North Carolina. Also, just a couple announcements, I guess, if you will. One is John and I have been working hard. We had to cancel the Loggers Expo this year because of coronavirus. Well, that is rescheduled for next year in April 29th and 30th. So that's going to happen. So excited to put that back on. And the issue with our guys is costs and everything. So we have launched a program called timberhauling.com. I encourage everybody to take a look at that. Basically, it's a platform that the endowment is funding to make it work. And what the purpose of it is, it's a co-op, if you will. But instead of a vendor working with every individual state, they now work with one entity, which is timberhauling.com. And we have a pilot with the 3 states, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. And the number one benefit goes to the logger himself. That's our goal, is to help them as much as possible. And there's enough savings, they could literally save tens of thousands of dollars. The second benefit is to the vendor, because it gives them a direct channel to a difficult to reach audience. And the third benefit is to the state trade associations, because anybody can sign up, but after 6 months, they can sign up for free. But after 6 months, they have to belong to their state association. So it's a way for the state associations to grow, because we've, as a logging association, we probably tapped out as many members as we're going to get. We'll lose some, gain some. But this is a chance for us to grow with drivers. So this platform will encourage that. It's going to take a lot of work to get this going. Adaption is going to take some time, probably a couple of years, realistically, because it's a new technology, and getting loggers to come online and to understand there's real value there. It's just, that's a process. So every bit of education we can do in that will be helpful. So check out timberhauling.com, and appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And John and I have been working closely on all this legislation stuff at the federal level. And we appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thanks. We have just a few moments. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. For any questions folks might have, you can either drop it in the chat or speak up. But I very much appreciate Yul and John being here with us today. So I'll open it up to anybody that has any questions for the next couple of minutes here.
I have a question. Sorry. I have a question. This is Dr. Raspan, NCSU. I am curious if you have any information about the Rural Forest Markets Act and where that's at.
Is that a federal bill?
Yes.
I am not familiar with that bill.
That's the bill that will create guaranteed loans for companies that are looking to invest in the carbon market.
Like I mentioned earlier, this is John Hatcher again. NCFA is really kind of in our beginning phases of due diligence, because there are a lot of programs out there. For years, some of your institutional investment groups, TMOs and REITs, have carbon contracts. They're very complex. Takes legal teams to really navigate the waters of them. When I did my master's on carbon, and I will get your kind of question, there was so much uncertainty in it. So without really looking at the bill, I think it's going to go back to the devil's in the details. I think you have an administration that's going to encourage carbon markets. I think the key in the forest products industry is to recognize the full supply chain and how it plays a role in sequestering carbon. And if you cannot get there, I think we're going to have a lot of issues. That's just my opinion. talking with members. Like I said, we don't have an official position statement, so I don't really know what the stance we're going to take on it in the long run. But there's just a lot of discussion on there, recognizing the value chain as a whole and not just segments of it. So sorry, I'm not familiar with the bill, but that seems to be the premise of all these discussions around carbon, is how can we have a program that's equitable to everyone involved, and how do you account for losses, things of that nature. So I'm sure there's going to be plenty of bills over the next couple of years introduced, both at the state level and the federal on this.
Well, this is just it's a quick one pager. All it does is provide money. So it is not a, it doesn't necessarily influence the market that currently exists that people are already jumping on, including large companies like Microsoft. So yeah, you might want to look at it. It's, I don't know, maybe 2 paragraphs. So I was just curious.
Those tend to be the most, those tend to lead to the most frustration, the short bills.
Well, this is just to provide money. So there should be no frustration in that regard. It's just to get money out there to incentivize things.
Sure.
Mark?
AJ, I might provide a few insights on that. So there's about 4 different federal bills looking at climate smart agriculture and forestry. And some of them talk about USDA's role as a guarantor of some of those things. And this is another one of those bills that looks like that. Few of these bills are bipartisan, and so they may get a hearing, but I think a lot of them are placeholders. I sit on a group that's been going for 10 years in DC called the Forest Climate Working Group, and they're weighing in on these things. In fact, there's a internal document that we're reviewing, Leah, that talks about advocating at least federal guarantees on some of these loans. So it's being talked about. If you want to weigh in, USDA is often taking comments. They did on the climate smart agriculture. So it's fluid. I'm not as optimistic on them. There's some leftovers from the last administration that have been re-upped, like the Trillion Tree Initiative and others. A couple of congressmen and senators from both sides have signed on to other bills, and they look like they may have merits, but with the logjam, I'm not that positive. One last thing I'd add to what John and Ewing said. On the federal level, in addition to transportation, there's interest on this workforce. So AF&PA and I think AWC, the American Wood Council, sent a letter of support. In addition to the transportation fixes, opening up vocational schools and advocating for a US-based workforce. And in addition to that, the H2A type folks that are part and parcel to our business. So that's all I add. Thanks.
Mark, thank you for mentioning that.
This is Tony. Just a comment. John mentioned the Forest Management Committee meeting in early July. Dave Tenney with the National Alliance of Forest Owners will be one of our speakers, and will be addressing the Forest Climate Working Group, as well as some other efforts by the Institution of Timberland Owners, and there'll be additional folks talking about where is the lay of the land on carbon, and the effort being looking at how should the NCFA and others what sorts of positions might we arrive at, and where should we be. In addition, we've been involved with the Natural and Working Lands group that has put together a whole climate action plan based on the governor's Executive Order 80. There's a lot of recommendations in that involve forest land. So there's a lot moving on climate action, carbon. So please stay tuned in, and if you can join into the Forest Management Committee meeting July 8th, I believe it is, isn't it, John?
That's correct.
Then we would certainly welcome that, especially virtually, if you can log on virtually or in person. So I just want to make a plug for the committee and ask for participation. Thank you, guys.
Great. All right, that kind of leads us up into the transition, the second door prize. So as you know, the first one came from Duke University. I want to say thank you if I didn't say that before. Thank you for providing that, Duke. The second door prize is courtesy of NC State. So a special thank you to them. I'm going to go ahead and try and share screen again. And let's see here. If you guys are seeing that now, someone give me a thumbs up. All right, good. So we got ran between here, Excel function. We'll go ahead and run it again. 39. Lucky winner is Tom Giroux, colleague of mine. Congratulations, Tom. I know he's on the call as well. All right. And let's see here. Stop share. Okay. So next up, we have another student from NC State, Charlie. Charlie, if you go ahead and unmute and introduce our next speaker. I think it'll be of interest to a lot of folks on the call. It's seeing that we've mentioned carbon several times now. So.
Thank you. My name is Charlie Lane. I'm also a student from NC State, and I'm introducing Katie Fernholtz, who is the president and CEO of Dovetail Partners, a nonprofit environmental think tank based in Minneapolis. She is a forester by training with more than 23 years of experience with forest management concerns. She has worked throughout the U.S. on efforts to address sustainability in forest management and the use of forest products. She serves in many leadership roles in the forest sector, including as board chair of the American Forest Foundation and on the Minnesota Forest Resources Council as a governor-appointed environmental representative.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie. Well, I am happy to be here, everyone. It's good to be with you. Let's see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Are you seeing my screen already? Did that go that? Yes.
Great.
Good. Let's get this into full presentation mode. Let's see if this is working. It's always a trick. Good. Does that look like full screen? Thumbs up. We're good to go. All right. Good. Well, and as we go through, I mean, as you know how this is when you're in presentation mode, you can't see everyone. So please do not hesitate to interrupt me if something's off the rails or need to do something a little bit different. But as I said, I am thrilled to be here. Already the conversations around carbon, I think, get us into the right lane about what we're going to talk about. I'm sure there's some familiar faces here, so many of you, it's good to see you again. And I hope many of you are also familiar with Dovetail. And otherwise, please check out our website and the work that we do. But we're going to talk about carbon opportunities for forests and forest products. We're going to look at that full spectrum. We'll do some basics. We'll get into talking just about carbon pools, some of that basic science. There's people on the call. I know that there's many ways you can go into this conversation. We'll get into some of the basics around carbon offsets, those carbon markets. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the headlines we've all been seeing, the latest developments, those kinds of things. But those of you that know me, I have opinions. So you won't get out of this without hearing some of my thoughts and ideas and kind of a call to action, I think, for the forest sector of really leadership opportunities that we have available. And I think some of the policy conversation already gets us into that a little bit. But let's dive right in. Before we start, I always like, just as foresters, just reminding ourselves of the wonderful role we have. And sometimes looking at pictures of forests and reminding ourselves of the beautiful spaces that we care for is just puts me in a happy place. The picture on the right is me in one of my happy places in northern Minnesota. But just as a starting point, we do wonderful work with wonderful benefits and outcomes for so many stakeholders and affected parties. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that the role that we have and the role that we play. So when it comes to carbon, there's 3 pillars of carbon opportunities for forests and forest products. And my viewpoint is it's absolutely essential to always be thinking of these 3 in partnership. That doesn't always happen, but I think that's essential for the pathway forward and the long play, the game plan for the forest sector. So of course, forests sequester carbon, photosynthesis, carbon from the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, photosynthesis, stored in the tree, stored in the forest soils. There's forests store carbon, and wood grown in the forest stores carbon. So wood in use products from the forest store carbon, and wood and forest products can be used as a substitute for high emitting, more intensive fossil fuel based materials. So these are the 3 dimensions of forest and forest product carbon that create the full spectrum of possibilities for the forest sector. And then it starts to get complicated, right? Anyone who's spent 10 minutes with forest carbon, it instantly gets into a whole bunch of jargon and a whole bunch of classifications. So there's those basic 3 pillars, but then we have to break this down into these quantifiable segments of where carbon exists within the forest and within forest products. So you end up with this concept of carbon pools, carbon definitions of where carbon resides in these distinct elements. So within the forest, there's these 5 carbon pools. Above ground biomass, that's highlighted because that's kind of the big obvious one. That's the trees, everything above ground. You get into below ground biomass with roots, you get into dead wood, you get into litter, you get into soil organic, and it gets a little more, there's more uncertainty around some of those pools. Obviously, they're less measurable. I mean, there's just some barriers to having great precision around some of those pools, but above ground biomass is kind of the anchor point within those forest pools. When it comes to forest derived products or the wood products, there's really 2 pools that are recognized. Harvested wood products in use. So oftentimes people think of that as the built environment and where we have wood products in use. Also wood in landfills. I mean, I think we all understand the reality when things go into a landfill and in that environment, the decay rate is greatly delayed. And so you do end up with carbon storage for materials that are in landfills. And that is not an insignificant amount of carbon storage, and it can be quantified. So when we talk about carbon, we can talk about it in this very broad sense, forest carbon, forest product carbon, but you'll also see conversations that get really into these details as well. So just want to be aware of these more detailed classifications. I want to spend a little time looking at starting with forest carbon and the pools within the forest, and then how that connects to harvested wood products and storage within use and the connection to substitution. So this is a typical chart showing forest carbon and how it fluctuates over time. You have the carbon, per hectare, we have the time across the bottom scale. And this again is representing some of those different carbon pools or carbon categories. And what you can see is old carbon, soil carbon, if you want to think of it that way, litter and residues. You also see the residues post-harvest, and then the trees, that above ground biomass, the above ground carbon, and how that increases over time as trees are growing. Those little jagged lines represent thinning, events, and then a regeneration harvest, replanting, and it fluctuates over time. So this is a typical chart that may be used to represent carbon in the forest over time at the stand level, at an individual management unit level. And sometimes when this is presented to decision makers or policy makers, they're left with the impression that forest carbon is widely fluctuating. It's a roller coaster. Oh my goodness, up and down. And there's a sense sometimes, there's a perception from external stakeholders that aren't familiar with forest management that there's a lot of variability in forest carbon. So it's important to kind of step back from that stand viewpoint and really look at forests across the landscape. So the top of this slide is showing that same thing we saw on the last slide, forest carbon at the stand level. It goes up over time, that above ground biomass, the trees grow, they're harvested, they grow, they harvest. So at a stand level, at a management unit level, yes, there's this fluctuation over time. But if we step back and look at an ownership level, or we look at just a larger part of the landscape, obviously any given year, the harvest is not impacting that whole landscape. So you just don't see the same level of fluctuation. And of course, when we step back at a much broader level, whether you're talking about a state level or a regional or a national level, then you really start to see that stability within forest carbon. And as many of us are well aware, at a national level, annual harvesting rates within our forest, impact less than 2% of the forest acre. I mean, 1.2% has been thrown out. Some states, as you well know, is maybe as high as 3%, but it's single digit percentages that are impacted by harvesting activities each year. So there's this huge bank of forest carbon that's stored and creates that stability. So this is one of the conversations, because sometimes, like I said, stakeholders, decision makers, there's that lens of how we think about our forest at the local scale all the way to the national scale and what that means for carbon impacts. The third way to really look at this gets at that next piece, the harvested wood products and the substitution benefits. So this chart is the bottom part of this chart, that green part's the same thing we've been looking at with forest carbon within the individual stand where the trees are growing, harvested over time, this kind of thing. But what this chart is showing is if the wood from that harvest is put into, let's say, the built environment, long-lived wood products are put into use, that strip of wood represents the carbon from that forest going into storage in use. And furthermore, if the wood from that harvest that goes into use is used as a substitute for concrete, then you can avoid all those emissions shown in gray. So this slide starts to show the cumulative benefit of forest carbon, especially carbon in managed forests, carbon stored in wood products, and products used as a substitute for higher emitting materials. So you start to see that forest carbon is just the foundation. It's just a starting point for this conversation. But the forest sector, the forest product sector, has these other benefits to offer. And this does not mean that, concrete, steel, fossil fuels don't have a role to play. Of course they do. We all have to work together in terms of material choices and where they're optimized in their use. But there are opportunities where wood is a valuable and appropriate substitute for some materials. And that's the door that needs to be opened and further explored. And the reality is that this opportunity is well recognized. I mean, we can go back decades and look at some of the formative reporting on climate change and climate change mitigation opportunities. And it's consistently recognized that forest products are unique in that they are renewable, reusable, biodegradable, they store carbon, they can be used in place of other materials. This is not new. This has been around for a very long time, very well recognized within climate literature and mitigation strategies and recommendations. It's kind of been this opportunity out there on the table, and I think it's time to step into that opportunity in some meaningful ways. So stepping into that opportunity, part of that question is, well, how do we monetize this? So forests provide all these opportunities, forest products provide all these opportunities. What's the market opportunity? How do we monetize these benefits and move into that space? So there's these forest carbon pools. There's the ways of measuring this in the forest, or like we talked about, just mapping that out. That has to transition into forest offsets, forest carbon credits. There's some different language used there, whether it's regulatory or voluntary. But there's these categories of forest offset types that are tradable within forest markets. And so these offsets can be related to tree planting, whether it's afforestation or reforestation, related to forest management, related to avoided conversion or reduced deforestation. Offsets can also be related to harvested wood products and substitution, where wood products are used instead of other materials, whether it's for bioenergy or for other types of interactions. And I highlight those three because that's where we see some of the, where we see a lot of the development and interest is around forest management, and where we see, I think, future opportunity is around the other two, harvested wood products and the substitution. There's a lot of history around tree planting, reforestation or afforestation, but that hasn't been the focus in recent years. In recent years, a lot of the focus has been around this terminology of natural climate solutions. And that's a broad category that recognizes all the ways the natural environment can contribute to climate change mitigation. And so as it's shown on this chart, natural climate solutions across the landscape, from forests to agricultural lands and grasslands to wetlands, recognizing all parts of the landscape are part of the biogenic carbon cycle and can contribute to climate change mitigation. Already are contributing to climate change mitigation. It's part of their function. But what you also see on this chart is how significant the role of forests is projected to be. Reforestation is significant, avoided forest conversion, natural forest management. But obviously in this chart, forests are just recognized to be a leader within natural climate solutions. As was mentioned before, those of us that have been around more than a week, we might remember this thing, the Chicago Climate Exchange, right? Deja vu, right? We've been here before. Carbon is not new. There's some dimensions of it that seem to be, changing and challenging what we've done in the past. But just want to acknowledge, the Chicago Climate Exchange was a very significant effort. When it closed in 2010, there was this perception that, maybe this was all over or something. But largely the Chicago Climate Exchange ended in 2010 because of policy uncertainty, that when people kind of diagnose what was the major cause of that closure, that's kind of comes to the top. In terms of just policy uncertainty, there was expectation at the time that federal policy within the US might have created more stability for carbon markets, but that hadn't emerged. And so there was difficulty to continue operating the Chicago Climate Exchange. But just want to acknowledge the Chicago Climate Exchange had all of these kinds of offset opportunities within it. Reforestation was there, harvested wood products were recognized. So a lot of the things we're talking about today, there's a long history of looking at those opportunities for the forest sector, and we're just revisiting them for the next generation. So this is a little bit of the lay of the land when we're trying to understand players and whatnot within carbon markets today. And so there's really three categories of who's doing what and how does this all work together. And you can read this from the top down or the bottom up, whichever one works best for you. But at the broadest category at the top, when we talk about carbon markets, there are two buckets. There's voluntary markets, there's compliance markets. And so voluntary markets is everything under the sun. Individual companies making commitments, defining their own goals, individual states. No, I shouldn't say states, that'd be compliance. But voluntary is, I mean, they're really individual designs. And so there's a whole bunch of opportunity in voluntary where basically you just negotiate a particular exchange. It can be very, very custom is, I think, the way to think of voluntary. There's structure within voluntary. We'll talk about that in a minute, but just to be clear, voluntary can be a lot of different things. Compliance means that there's a cap and trade market, and that there's structure and regulation around those compliance markets. In the US, the California compliance market, the California cap and trade is the big one that's influencing that side of things. The vast majority of carbon activity is on the voluntary side, but the best prices for offsets are on the compliance side. So there's these two big buckets where activity is happening, and there are pros and cons in each one. I don't believe it's possible to say this is the way to go, or it all depends on the situation in terms of a landowner's objectives or everything else. So there's some trade-offs across voluntary and compliance, but they're both very influential, sizable, and meaningful markets. One of the indicators of how much voluntary and compliance are both contenders is the fact that they use the same registries, they use the same project developers. The rest of this chart overlaps. So the top is separate. You have voluntary and compliance, they're separate universes. But all the registries where a project is put on the market and listed, they list voluntary, they list compliance, these worlds intersect there. The project developers work across these worlds too, voluntary and compliance. So it creates kind of an interesting setup. And like I said, if you read this from the bottom up, project developers, those are, the consultants and the people that run around knocking on doors, trying to get landowners to sign up, whatever it might be. And they are the ones that design the project, quantify the carbon, make sure it's compatible with the requirements of the market. And when they get that project all developed, designed, quantified, they get to put it in the registry. And it's listed like a shopping list of carbon offsets that are out there. And each of those registries will register different projects under the different protocols, the different requirements as defined by the markets or as developed by the project developers. So it's one of those things. There are a lot of moving pieces in the carbon market. There's a lot of different players. These are the basic 3 layers. And like I said, when it comes to registries and project developers, there's a lot of overlap. They're doing lots of different things for both voluntary and compliance markets. So it's hopefully that gives a little bit of the lay of the land and you see where some of the players fit in. So when we look at, I use that word protocols. Protocols are really the requirements for a carbon offset project, what has to happen to be eligible, to be registered, to be sold for qualified offsets, either regulatory or voluntary. This is an example of, what's required within the California cap and trade regulation for forest offsets, or the types of management that can be used to qualify for a forest management project. So those 4 bullet points, what we always hear about with improved forest management offsets is the potential for increasing rotation ages. So you hold that carbon on the landscape longer and you get credit for that. Increasing productivity by thinning or improving forest health in different ways. Increasing productivity with managing the competition in the forest and these types of things. Increasing stocking. I mean, these are some of the basic ideas for what might be an improved forest management project. And the core thing within these forest management offset projects is that the landowner has to be engaged in activities that will increase carbon storage or prevent the loss of carbon stored. So there's 2 ways always to look at offsets: increasing storage or preventing emissions, preventing loss. So there's a bunch of room here in terms, especially in the voluntary market, if landowners and land managers can demonstrate one of those outcomes. The carbon markets have all kinds of requirements for how to quantify, measure, document, verify. There's a whole bunch of, not to be too flippant about it, but I think carbon market offsets have created a whole new job security for people that do forest inventory. We're all relevant again. Everybody wants to count trees again. So yeah, forest inventory for the next generation involves carbon. But the offset credits, you have to have an estimate of the carbon in the trees, a baseline of where you're starting from with your carbon, and estimates of what carbon might be removed from harvesting. There's a bunch of terms that come up in forest markets. One of them is leakage. Another one is additionality. And we can talk more about that in the discussion if people want to kind of get into some of those details. But each protocol has definitions for those and ways to mitigate for leakage or address additionality and be accountable to that. And so it's all structured. I mean, if anyone's been involved with carbon markets already, you know that it's a regulated contract-based exchange with all kinds of details for accountability within that exchange. So this is just a map of showing where California cap and trade forest offset projects have occurred across the country. I mean, fairly well distributed. And just an idea that there's activity in forest carbon markets, even though it's called the California market, it's impacting activities across the country, and it's certainly quantifiable. What we've started to see in some states is, like was mentioned before, when you're kind of going through this due diligence process to kind of understand carbon markets and what's working, what's not working. What we've seen in a lot of states is get the people in your state that are in these markets to present and share their case study, their experience. We've had some really good dialogues in different states from land managers and landowners that have kicked the tires on these programs and have some very personal applied insights. So I'm guessing perhaps you've already done that in your region, but would certainly recommend it. Just talking to the land managers, landowners that are participating in these programs. So just to touch on some of the developments we've seen lately, some of the players that we've seen in the forest carbon market. Finite Carbon is a carbon project developer. They only do forestry projects. This kind of shows some of their impact, 3 million acres and these kinds of things. So Finite Carbon is one of the companies that's out there that will provide services for evaluating project feasibility, all kinds of things, but they focus on forest carbon offsets. Many other carbon project developers will do, landfill methane or any other type of carbon project you can imagine, but Finite Carbon focuses on forestry. This is NCX. Up until a few weeks or months ago, Sylvia Terra was the name used here. NCX is pretty new on the field, but in the Southeast US, they really hit the ground running. I think it was 11 or 13 states where they offered signups over the last 6 months or so. They're looking at rolling out nationwide in the coming months, if it hasn't happened already. And their real angle, market differentiation, is to have a really easy sign up process for landowners to try and make it more feasible for small family forest and private landowners to participate. And they also have a real focus on just delayed harvest. Some of what has been talked about, a lot of what's been talked about is just delaying harvest for 1 year and getting some real short-term 1-year contracts around carbon offsets. And this has not been without controversy. Because it is a significant departure from how other forest carbon offset projects have been developed. And I think it begins to show us the types of market differentiation we could see going forward, and how that may or may not really result in increased participation, but we're starting to see differentiation. And that is, for forest carbon offsets, we've been kind of stuck in the same model of project development for 10 to 15 years. And that's what we've started to see change in the last 1 to 2 years, is different, trying to find different ways to do this. And we'll see what that really means. As you can see, they're new to the market. They're a little over 1 million acres so far. My understanding is about 120 landowners have enrolled. So, dipping their toe in the pool. And then the Nature Conservancy and American Forest Foundation, they've rolled out the Family Forest Carbon Program. This has been in a pilot stage, but looking to expand into additional areas as well. Again, focused to a large extent on engaging family forests, small, non-industrial private forest landowners that traditionally have had trouble accessing forest carbon market opportunities. So that's a little bit of the lay of the land. I want to transition, like I warned you, into some of my own opinions and thoughts on this, and where I think the forest sector can have influence and can chart a course that will benefit our sector in more meaningful ways. So this, is showing the lay of the land with the forest sector. And to date, so much of the forest carbon market conversation has been on the left side of this chart, looking at forest lands, looking at harvesting, looking at forests, touching on reforestation. But so much of this forest carbon market conversation has been forest focused. I think the opportunity going forward is really on the right-hand side of this chart. And this is where the forest sector has to step up and be part of this conversation and be presenting ideas of how to bring in this right side of this chart. Because what we know is forest products have a role to play in climate mitigation, carbon storage, both through their use and through the substitution with other materials. And that can influence our built environment, it can influence our material selection, and it can influence our energy sector. The other blunt way I think of this is climate change, forests didn't make climate change. Forests aren't the root cause of climate change. Some of these systems, energy systems, the built environment, our material selection are really root causes. And so if there is a commitment to addressing climate change, we have to be working on some of those root causes. Because this is the data I always find kind of shocking when we think about where wood fits in to our economy, our material selection, how we operate. So, over the last 50 some years, population growth in the world has increased about 2.5 times. Over that same time period, we increased our use of steel 5 times, cement 12 times, aluminum 12 times, plastics more than 25 times. So these materials we are using at rates greatly exceeding population growth. Wood, our use of wood globally has not even kept pace with population growth. So I understand some people would say, oh, that's great, we're saving wood. I don't agree with that viewpoint. I think we are losing our connection to wood. I think we are becoming a plastic-based society. I think we need to re-embrace natural materials and make them part of our economy and make them part of our lives in a meaningful way that puts us back into relationship with the land. So I think this data is fundamental to understanding where we go next and the balance we need to achieve in our material use and our material selection and the opportunity that forests and forest products offer. So this is not, unquantifiable, the benefit of forest products and the opportunity to store carbon in harvested wood products. So this is a report that looked at, the role of forests and forest products in climate mitigation. So all of these different colors are different things we could do with our forests and forest products to achieve greater carbon storage or greater climate mitigation. And you see in these states that green bar and kind of in the middle of a lot of these, that's increased retention of harvested wood products. And so that speaks to the measurable impact we can see if we adjust how we use wood and how we retain it and keep it in use in those kinds of benefits. So I think those green bars are some of the opportunities that the forest sector can really continue to advocate for. We're, of course, regeneration and avoided deforestation and some of these things are contributors, but we need to make sure that that green bar around harvested wood products is appropriately emphasized and kept in balance with the other things. This is data that just shows, where we have carbon storage across the landscape and across those different carbon pools that we talked about in the beginning, from the forest to finished products. So that big green, that 452 million metric tons, that's at above ground biomass. And like I said, that's where a lot of the attention has been focused when it comes to carbon offsets in forests, is really looking at the trees. But that yellow and orange bar, that's where we're talking about storage and wood products right now in use in our built environment. And the yellow is wood in landfills, like we talked about, solid waste disposal sites. But I think there's an opportunity, especially to grow that orange, to make some inroads in making the orange bigger, making this overall pie bigger, but making, really investing there. Because we can quantify that, increasing wood use to the maximum extent feasible in multifamily housing, non-residential construction, remodeling, it could result in a carbon benefit of about 21 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually, equivalent to taking 4 million automobiles off the road. So we can quantify this. This is just a mathematical exercise. And I want to draw attention to this number because, if you remember looking at some of the project developers that are out there, they're impacting 3 million acres, 1 million acres. After all these years of carbon offset projects, it's not as if it's, had this massive impact across the landscape. There's still an awful lot of room for growth here and a need for growth if it's really going to have a meaningful impact. So we can take this kind of quantification, we can apply this to individual building projects. Here's an apartment building, and if using 2.3 million board feet, we can quantify how much carbon it stores and how much that you can avoid if you're using wood instead of some other materials in some of these building projects appropriately. And so this benefit of carbon storage in forest products and substitution, it's across the spectrum. I mean, you can look at it in the built environment, but this also, like I said before, impacts packaging and material choices, impacts energy opportunities as well. So really moving forward, making sure that we have a way to value carbon across the entire life cycle from forest to finished products is, I think, key for the benefits that we want to see. So bottom line, forest carbon offset opportunities, they're growing again. It might be a little deja vu for those of us that remember the Chicago Climate Exchange. I would say that despite all the big headlines and hubbub around forest carbon, when you really pull back the curtain, the level of investment, we're not at, I mean, it's there. If you see the projections, yes, the level of investment that will really create impact, it could be right around the corner, but we're certainly not there yet. I mean, these are, the number of acres enrolled, the number of landowners participating is still pretty incremental. And so unless we see some of the projections around carbon valuations happen, but even then, I think it's going to be difficult to get to the level of investment that that some people are hoping for. Bottom line, because we're still at the beginning stages of this, I think it's absolutely the right time for the forest sector to be at the table, to be engaged, and to be putting together policy proposals for how we include all of the dimensions of forest and forest products in this conversation. And I think the work of the Forest Climate Working Group is a cornerstone to this, but the work at the national and regional, or excuse me, at the state level and regional level is also essential. So as I said, it's these three pillars for us to focus on: forests, wood, and substitution. And like I said, this has been recognized in the carbon and climate change literature for decades, that in the long term, a sustainable forest management strategy that increases forest carbon stocks while providing these products from the forest, that is the pathway forward for addressing expectations and concerns around climate change. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and open to any discussion and anything I may have missed in the chat. But please, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. Just happy to be here and to be part of this conversation.
Thank you very much, Katie. We got a couple minutes for questions. One that came into the chat that I saw was from Stephen. How do the millions of acres impacted by wildfire address this?
Very good question. And there's recognition that wildfire is a risk for carbon emission. There hasn't been a very good protocol put forward for that. We've seen some efforts around improve forest health and reduce wildfire risk as a way to do an offset. But that to me is an opportunity that people that understand forest science, wildlife fire science, really engaging in that and making sure that landowners that take action to prevent wildfire can be given credit for that. But that's not a well-developed opportunity at this point.
I have a question. I was just wondering, how do you envision a carbon market developing for manufacturing and the building industry, and where the incentive would come from, and sort of how that would play out?
Yeah, it's one of those things I've reflected on this a lot. Like, what does it really look like to have something that invests in what we want to see happen? And there's no easy answer here, but I think what you're saying is exactly what we need to come around the table and start envisioning. So I can envision, like right now the conversation is we have investment in forest management. So the payments from the forest carbon offsets can go directly into paying the cost of tree planting, or non-commercial, timber stand improvement treatments, or whatever it is. So that's the investment scenario we've set up right now in these forest carbon offsets. So where my mind has gone is, well, what would it look like to have an offset that invests in expanding sawmill capacity, or invests in new manufacturing capacity, or invests in some other dimension? Even what I've tried to think about is, what are the investment needs across the forest sector, and how could you structure forest carbon offsets to impact those investment needs. That to me is the broad bucket, is where we need investment and how do you quantify the carbon benefits from those investments. And then you can think about who are the stakeholders to those benefits and investments. On the forest carbon side, we have seen individual companies that want to have net zero, want to achieve net zero commitments and change their carbon footprint. I think that same opportunity exists on the forest product side, that there are all kinds of companies. They don't have to be forest product related. They're looking for ways to reduce their carbon footprint. And if the benefits of forest carbon products are quantifiable, then I think that that same relationship can exist, just expanding from what we have. But like I said, I think this is where we need to put our energy and focus, because I'm not saying that anything I said is the right answer, but to me, there's this whole space there of possibilities.
I have a question, if I may. You guys just published a report on biomass energy related to climate conservation and so on. And obviously one of the folks that we hear from and are challenging us is folks like the Dogwood Alliance and their views on pellets and timber harvesting for that matter. But in your paper, you talk about climate smart forestry practices, and one of the things in there is eliminating clear cutting as a term within forestry practice. And I'm not sure what you meant by that or where you headed with that, but I'd love to hear you comment on it.
Good, excellent, thank you. I appreciate the question. Yeah, and the main takeaway, Richard Donovan, the lead author on that article. I've known Richard my whole career and I've intersected in lots of sustainability spaces. Both of us have been involved with the Sustainable Biomass Partnership. I think I don't know if he's on the board at this point, but I was involved with their technical committee. But both of us have deeply engaged in this, the responsible sourcing within bioenergy. And when it comes to this term clear cutting, the main point in that article, again, led by Richard's perspective, is sometimes there's times where language matters. And there's a lot of times when language matters. And clear cutting is a term that foresters, it may be doing more harm than good to keep using a term that means one thing to us and something else to the rest of the world. That's the main point. And there are parts of the country that have really moved away from using the term clear cutting. Regeneration harvest is used in some areas quite consistently to have a different way of talking about what the goals are of that event, that management activity. So that's the main point. I mean, to the extent that the term clear cutting breaks down dialogue, then as foresters, we can talk about our work in different ways and not fall into that trap. So that's the main point. Because I think, as we all recognize, clear cutting, the way it's practiced today is not the way it was practiced in generations past. We have buffer areas, we have set asides, we implement BMPs. We do design every harvest to plan for regeneration. So there is another way to talk about it. That was the main point of it. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm sure that we could come up with something different. And you're right. Clear cutting to us means one thing, and
Exactly.
for the general public, it means something else. But you also have things like uneven age management techniques, and I'm sure that is possible in a lot of systems.
Yeah, but not everywhere. Not everywhere. There's plenty of places where even age management is the right thing to do ecologically and economically. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I also wondered what your perspective was on the campaign that our friends in the Dogwood Alliance are putting forward, essentially advocating for stopping all timber harvesting.
I know. And I'll tell you my position, and part of the reason we did that article with Richard is there are two things. Is we have got to, and everybody, this is foresters, stakeholders, interested parties, affected parties, we have got to embrace complexity. Stop thinking that there are yes, no answers, one size fits all. That's wrongheaded. Climate change is complex, forest management is complex, and thank goodness that it is, because that's our resiliency. We are not going to do the same thing everywhere. And that's why we are going to continue to have biodiversity and resiliency and multiple ways of addressing challenges and change. So anytime there's this idea that this is the simple answer, I have real problems with that. It ignores the complexity, the resiliency, and the opportunities that are available to us. I don't think that that is a professional approach and a way to move forward constructively that's respectful of the professions and the professionals that have embraced complexity and can operate within that complexity. Secondly, like I said before, forests aren't the root cause of climate change. If we're going to point the finger about climate change, it is our energy system. And that is harsh but true. And if we are going to address climate change, we have got to address our energy system. And biomass energy is part of evolution within the energy system that is fundamental to addressing the root causes of climate change. So when I see organizations that are resisting change in the energy system, I bluntly believe that they are protecting the status quo. And I think that is an indefensible position if you believe climate change is the crisis of our times. If you believe climate change is the crisis of our times, you have to be working for change and meaningful change that is feasible and operational and meaningful change within our energy system. So I believe that biomass has an essential role to play in transitioning our energy systems. I think the benefits we've seen in the EU with their climate policy and their commitment to changing their energy system provide a roadmap that is worth really looking at closely and looking at what can be replicated from that.
Thank you so much. That's a really thoughtful response, and I appreciate it. Also, just recently listened to an economics of carbon forum, and one of the professors is at State, Justin Baker, gave a lot of, he does a lot of work on modeling.
Yep.
And one of the things that he talks about is how the way to really sequester carbon is through enhanced productivity and additional management. I wonder if you could comment on that.
I think enhancing productivity, management strategies for reduce mortality or increase growth, absolutely. It's a pillar of how we can increase that storage on the landscape, increasing those sequestration rates in that growth. But that doesn't operate in a vacuum, right? You have to still look across the whole landscape. And just like we were talking about a minute ago, preventing wildfire so that carbon storage isn't lost is also, these things all have to operate together. And but we shouldn't leave anything off the table. We shouldn't pick our favorite things and ignore the rest, right? And there should be a buffet of forest carbon options. And I think, one of the things I find stimulating about that is, as foresters, we can go back to our toolbox of silvicultural treatments and say, hey, is there something, there are many different ways to do silviculture, and climate change mitigation may be an invitation for us to experiment and dust off some tools a little bit as we look at providing those additional benefits. But absolutely, improved forest management, improving forest productivity is right in that buffet. How do you like that analogy, a buffet of forest carbon? I don't know, anyone here a fan of buffets? Yeah, anyway, yeah.
Katie, we really appreciate your passion
Thank
for
you.
this and your time for presenting to us today. Unfortunately, we're pushed up against time. I would ask that you maybe put some contact information in the chat box if you would. And I believe there are a couple more questions if you have time today, if you don't mind answering those in the chat. In the interest of, so thank you again.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, we will do 2 door prizes at the end of the next, or at the next slated time to do door prizes. And Michael Scott is a Duke University student, master's student, and he's going to introduce our next speaker. So Michael, if you're on, go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, AJ. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. So I am introducing Dr. Jennifer Archambault. Dr. Archambault joined the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service last year as the recovery lead biologist for aquatic animals at the Raleigh Field Office. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Fisheries and Wildlife Sciences in 2004 from NC State when she worked as a forestry technician on the university's forest. Her consulting years kept her in the forest, managing woodpeckers and wetlands, and then she traded in her hiking boots for waders to study freshwater mussel thermal tolerance for her Master of Science in Zoology with a minor in toxicology. As research staff, she continued to focus on mollusks and aquatic toxicology, addressing pressing management issues. Dr. Archambault earned her PhD in 2002 from NC State, studying the pollutant removal ecosystem services of freshwater mussels, and public understanding of nature's contributions to water quality. Welcome, Dr. Archambault. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. You awarded my honorific earlier than I got it. I just got it last year in 2020. So thank you. Let's see if I can share my screen successfully, navigate the hardest part of these virtual presentations.
Looks good. We can see you.
Wonderful. I'd like to just say thank you so much for the invitation to come speak with you all today. Public engagement was a significant part of my PhD, and now working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, it's really important for me to be able to engage with lots of stakeholders and interested parties. So glad to talk with you all. So as he said, I'll be talking about managing forests around rare aquatic animals and hopefully give a little bit of insight on that. Since I'm pretty new to the service myself, I wanted to share the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service mission because it starts with working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. If you're not familiar with our agency, we have a couple of field offices in North Carolina. So I'm out of the Raleigh office, and we have a couple of sub offices. And we also have an Asheville office. And our work areas, if you'd like a forest reference, is kind of from Uwharrie's east is the Raleigh office area, and Uwharrie's west is Asheville area. So the objectives for this talk today are to cover several topics I was asked to talk about. I'm going to introduce the federally listed and at-risk aquatic animals today that are in North Carolina. I'll talk about their listing status under the Endangered Species Act, cover their habitat needs and what stressors are, and I'll go over some Fish and Wildlife Service technical guidance and web-based tools to help you figure out how you're able to be aware of when your operations are around these animals. And then we'll do some connections of forest management and protected species, because forest landowners and forest practitioners are important partners for us to work with. So just as a little bit of background on the Southeast aquatic fauna, I wanted to share a little bit about the biodiversity here. So this is from a paper that shows freshwater fish biodiversity on the left, and then endemism or endemic species on the right. And those are those narrow range restricted species that need very specialized habitats. And so as you can see from this, we are blessed with very rich fauna in the United States, and in the Southeast particularly. And a lot of our species rely on just very specialized narrow areas. Similar is true for freshwater mussel biodiversity, and these are the two groups that I'll be talking about a lot. So the freshwater mussels occur all over the world, of course, and here I'm highlighting another heat map where white is the hottest, and you can see the southeastern US is the biodiversity hotspot across the globe. So that just sets up, we've got this wonderful biodiversity. We also have a lot of legacy effects from human land use, and then a lot of urbanization, population growth, and intensive land uses in our area. And so we've ended up with some species that are in decline. So now I'm going to talk about the North Carolina Federal Trust species, those endangered, threatened, and at-risk aquatic animals. So endangered species are those that are at risk of extinction in the foreseeable future. Threatened species are those that are at risk of becoming endangered in the foreseeable future. And at-risk aquatic animals are those that are in decline. They may have already been petitioned for listing, or there are candidate species, but they haven't been listed yet. So I'll start with critters with a backbone are listed fishes and vertebrates in North Carolina. I'll go clockwise from the top left on the next few slides. So Waccamaw silverside and the Cape Fear shiner, their names basically tell you where they live. They're a couple of these endemic species. Also the spot fin chub, and then a couple of newly listed species are the Carolina mad tom on the bottom right and the Neuse River water dog on the bottom left. That one is a threatened species with a 4D rule that is related to, that has some implications for forestry. And so we'll talk about what a 4D rule is and what the forestry exception is for you all here in just a little bit. We have a lot of mussels listed in North Carolina, so I'll cover these kind of regionally. Eastern North Carolina mussels include the Tar River spiny mussel, dwarf wedge mussel. You can see that it's nestled in some nice clean substrates there, which are important for a lot of our endangered species. The threatened yellow lance, Atlantic pigtoe is proposed threatened, and it's been in that process for quite a while. So we expect that one to be finalized maybe later this summer, but definitely this year. And then the green floater on the bottom left is one of those at-risk species. In Western North Carolina, we have the Appalachian elk toe mussel, the little winged pearly mussel, Carolina heel splitter, the long solid, which was just recently proposed as threatened, the James spiny mussel. So 2 of the 3 spiny mussels in the entire world occur partly in North Carolina. And then again, the green floater. I mentioned there's a lot of endemism in the southeastern US, and we have a lot of North Carolina or regional endemics as well. So this just shows you several of the endemics that we have. Waccamaw silverside obviously occurs in a very small area. On the right-hand side, you see 3 of our species occur in the Tar and the Neuse River basins and nowhere else on the planet. And so those areas are especially important. We support a lot of species. I also wanted to talk a little bit about critical habitat for endangered and threatened species and what that is. And I wanted to start by defining critical habitat because there's a lot of good habitat or really important habitat or essential areas, but critical habitat is a specific term that means habitat that contains features essential to the conservation of a species and which may require special management and protection. So this is a term specific to the Endangered Species Act, and it is specific habitat areas that are needed for recovery. It's important to note that critical habitat has not been designated for all listed species. So especially those that have been listed a long time ago, for instance, dwarf wedge mussel and tar spiny were both listed in the 1980s, and they don't have critical habitat designated. And species may and do occur outside their critical habitat areas. So that could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe we find an area where they occurred where we didn't know they were before they were listed, or we may have just designated a portion of their habitat as critical habitat. Largely, this is a public awareness tool. It's a line on a map that helps us show the important areas for supporting conservation and recovery. And it's a consultation tool for us to use with other federal agency partners as well. So here's just a snapshot of the designated critical habitats in North Carolina. The red are finalized and the pink are proposed, although this map is already a little bit outdated. Those 2 species, Neuse River water dog and Carolina mad tom that were listed last week, still need an update on our online map. This is also a good reminder that I'm only talking about aquatic animals today. So that big chunk of land in Western North Carolina is Indiana bat critical habitat. And I'm not talking about sea turtles, just those river and stream critters mostly. Critical habitat can give you a little bit of an idea of how range restricted some species are. The Cape Fear shiner and Waccamaw silverside have very tiny ranges shown there. And here again is the proposed and final critical habitat in the Tar and Neuse River basins. And so that might give a picture of just how important those areas are for several species protection. One last thing I'll note is that designation of critical habitat by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does not affect land ownership or establish a refuge, reserve, or other conservation area. So that might be a misconception, and we try to make that clear. Okay, so we've talked about what species we have in North Carolina and where they occur a little bit. Next, I'd like to talk about the life history needs, so some of the species characteristics and what they need to thrive. And some of that is connected to how you manage the landscape as well. So I'm not going to cover all the species that I listed. I'll just cover a couple of groups of species. And I'd like to start with the benthic vertebrates. So there's a few of them that I'll highlight here: the Neuse River water dog, the Carolina mad tom, and the spot fin chub. All of these animals live at the stream bottom over gravel and sand, and they avoid fine silts. The water dog and mad tom need structure. They need boulders and woody debris and other shelter, and spot fin chub relies on that clean bottom as well. So they all need clean stream bed habitat that isn't silted in and compacted with fine sediments. And they also need highly oxygenated water. So all that work that you all do implementing BMPs to keep sediment out of the streams is really important for these animals. The fish especially like shallow flowing water, so not blocking up areas are important so that water can keep on flowing. Neuse River water dog likes a little bit deeper water, maybe a meter or so, but they all need flowing water. So these species are not found in impounded areas. They all eat aquatic insects, so it's important for the habitat to also support these prey species, and insects need that oxygenated area too. Water dog has a little more varied diet. It'll eat worms and even some small fishes, depending on the size of the water dog. If you haven't spotted the mad tom yet, it's right there hiding under a spent mussel shell. And this picture also has a bonus mussel. So it really emphasizes that these mussels often live in the stream bed. And that's just the siphon sticking out where it's filtering surface water. Next, I'll talk about the mussels together. So mussels have lots of different habitat needs, but there are some generalities that we can make. So I'll talk about them all together. They all live in the stream substrates. Depending on the species, they might have a little bit different preference for coarse sand and gravel or rocks, but in general, they all need flowing water, stable stream substrate, and a clean bottom. So sedimentation can be a real problem for these animals as well. The juveniles will live under the stream bed for a number of years. So if it gets really compacted, those organics can also rob the pore water spaces of oxygen. And so that can be an issue. So it's really important to keep that stuff out of the water. They also need fishes for development and dispersal. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. And mussels are filter feeders. So they largely take in, just as they filter water, they take in algae, bacteria, and other particles. A single mussel, depending on its size, can filter several gallons of water per day. So they're really, we like to call them the livers of the rivers. They clean them up. They can have important ecosystem services like clarifying water areas, and they can also neutralize harmful pathogens, for instance, E. coli. And for invertebrates, they have pretty long lifespans. So some may live as little as 10 years and some can live up to a century. Those that we have in North Carolina tend to live on the order of the 10 to 30-year range. So I mentioned that mussels need fishes. So good mussel habitat also has to be good fish habitat. So whatever the fishes need, the good water quality and clean waters are important for mussels too. So I'll just kind of review their life cycle very briefly, starting at the bottom. They do have sexual reproduction. This is kind of a precarious life cycle. So a male mussel upstream has to release sperm into water, and somewhere downstream, a female has to come into contact with that, siphon it, and fertilize her eggs. And so it's really important to support good dense populations of mussels, or mussel beds as we call them, to increase the chances of that happening. So her larvae are essentially just Pac-Man, two halves of a bivalve shell, and that's it. And somehow they have to end up on a fish host. So female mussels have a number of strategies they use to try to do this. Some might just broadcast spawn into the waters. Others might package up their larvae into something that looks like fish food. So this looks like maybe little worms that the Atlantic pigtoe mussel uses to target drift feeding minnows, which is their host. And so that's another important thing, is not just any fish will do. Each of these mussel species has a host or a variety of host fishes that they need. So other mussels have a really unique strategy. They've been fishing for millions of years, long before humans started fishing. This GIF shows a female's specialized tissue on her body that looks like a lure, and she's able to pulse it. And so it might look like a fish or a hellgrammite or something. And what you see sticking up there in the middle is her water tubes full of larvae. So a fish comes in, takes a bite, thinks it's going to get a meal, and it gets a face full of babies. So they clamp onto the tissue for a period of weeks, steal a few nutrients. It usually doesn't harm the fish, and then they drop off when they're fully formed. They go through metamorphosis and develop organs. So fish are also really important for dispersal. So connectivity is important as well. So I've talked about kind of what they need to thrive, and now I'll just cover just broadly some of the stressors that have contributed to the decline of these listed and at-risk species. These stressors can largely be, many of them can largely be categorized as habitat loss and degradation. And that can lead to reduced, fragmented and isolated populations, which make it difficult to reproduce and sustain. So here are some pictures of some very large scale, common pervasive threats, including point and non-point source pollution, runoff, heated effluents can be a problem. So temperature is an issue. So you keep those nice buffers on the stream, that helps in those forested areas too. Sedimentation is a major issue for many of the species. So those benthic animals, the mussels and the benthic vertebrates really need those clean stream bottoms. And also just habitat loss through things like impoundment. Impoundment is a major problem for the Cape Fear shiner. And it doesn't have to be large scale like this. Beaver ponds can be an issue even for some of our species. Another issue is invasive species, and they can be predators or competitors to many of our species. And this is kind of just insult to injury when you've got a species that's already in decline. So things like the flathead catfish might gobble up mad toms and water dogs, or the red swamp crayfish might be introduced from an aquaculture operation and end up eating eggs or something like that. We also have competitors. For instance, the brook silverside there on the bottom is not native to this area, and it's been introduced into Lake Waccamaw, which is an issue for our Waccamaw silverside, and that's the only place it occurs. It's also been shown, you might recognize this little shell in the middle as the Asian clam. You see those all over stream and lake shorelines, and more recent research has indicated that they are a direct competitor and can reduce growth in our native mussel populations. So now I'd like to introduce you to some Fish and Wildlife Service planning tools that help you find information about critical habitat and aquatic species near where you're working, near on your working land. So our forest partners are really important. Forest lands are really supportive of threatened and endangered species. Of course, urbanized areas are much harder to thrive in. And that tar noose area I showed you, some of the best areas are in the upper tar river basin, and that's largely because it's still mostly forested. So how can you be aware of where these critters occur? And a lot of times you might not have to worry too much about them, especially if you're doing work that is exempted from the Clean Water Act. But there is one BMP in there that is to not harm threatened and endangered species. So it's good to use these tools to be aware of when you need to be cognizant of those. So the first is our Fish and Wildlife Service Critical Habitat Mapper. This is an online interactive mapper that's really easy to use. If you like to use GIS, there's also shapefiles available for download. But you can use the interactive mapper and just enter the address or zoom to a location where you're working or managing lands. And then you can click on any critical habitat to see what species it is and find more information. And you're able to print that map as well if you need it for other uses. So I've just included some screenshots from this tool to kind of show you what you might expect if you were to use this. So if you go to our environmental conservation online system at ecos.fws.gov, you can find critical habitat report right there in the middle. If you click on that, it'll bring you to this page. And again, there are some GIS options if you prefer to work that way, but you can also just use our online mapper. That brings you to this zoomed out map of the whole United States and territories. And so you can zoom that in using the tools or just enter your address in. And once you've done that, you can see if there are any critical habitats located in your area. So reminder, these are places where that are essential to conservation of these species, and they might require special management and protection. So maybe that would influence the types of BMPs you would like to implement on an area. It'll tell you what species is there, and if there's more than one, it'll show like this one does, one of two. And then you can click that right arrow, and here you would see that the other animal is the Atlantic pigtoe. And you can also print this if you need it. The other tool I would like to talk about is the Information for Planning and Consultation, or IPAC. And this can also be reached at ecos.fws.gov. You can find it on that left sidebar of the homepage, or just enter /IPAC and it'll get you right here. This is also another easy to access tool and available online. You can enter your location or project area, and then you can receive a report of species that are in your area of influence. And when you go to this page, there's a couple options for either get started or log in. And log in is for folks that need formal consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Service. That's largely might not be foresters. Oftentimes that'll be developments and things like that. And so you can just find some information easily by using the get started, and you don't have to log in at all. And this is just a snapshot of the results page that comes up when you go through the process. You can see on the left-hand side, it shows you how many species are critical habitats and some other information that might be relevant to federal regulations or guidelines like wetlands. So again, you choose get started, it brings up a map again. You can enter your location or drag in a shapefile. And then you define your area by drawing it using the sketch or polygon tools, or again, just drag your area right in, a zipped up shapefile. And then tweak it as needed, and you can confirm, and then it'll give you an option to get a report. And so here I've just done a demonstration of that where I clicked around on a pretend parcel, and then you can see there are vertices you can move around once you're happy with that, and then it gives you a report. And so this is what the report looks like, and it mentions that it's not for formal consultation. So this is just for information. But here you get the list of all the different species that might be in your work area and links to find more information. So I wanted to wrap up with a couple of different topics related to connecting forest management, best practices, habitat, and talk about briefly a new partnership program that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the North Carolina Forest Service have worked together on over the last year. So you all know, I'm sure, the Clean Water Act objective is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters, including water quality, which provides for the protection and propagation of fish, shellfish, and wildlife. And so the BMP era kind of started after that or around that time, right? And so forestry best management practices, as you know better than I'm sure, have traditionally focused on physical and chemical parameters like keeping sediment out of the stream and keeping pollutants out of the stream, your fuels and that sort of thing. But these can also directly address the protection of those biological parameters like threatened and endangered, and of course the common species as well. We like to keep those common. First line of the Endangered Species Act is to provide for the conservation of endangered and threatened species of fish, wildlife, and plants. And so these two acts are connected of course, in your realm by those 15 federal BMPs, one of them being not to harm endangered and threatened species. So this act has several prohibitions that list that are largely things like importing and exporting and sale and transportation of species that are listed. But the most common one is take. So take can be willful things like, somebody that shoots an eagle or a red wolf, but it can also be things that are incidental. So incidental take is a taking incidental to and not the purpose of carrying out an otherwise lawful activity, like having a sediment plume come off your land when you're doing something, or building a school and not realizing you were nearby. So that this can include impacts to habitat that cause harm as well. The protections apply anywhere a species occurs. So that's why it's good to know not only where the critical habitat is, because it might not include everywhere the species occurs, but to use tools like IPAC. They'll let you know species are nearby. And oftentimes permits are required if an activity may result in a taking. So this builds up to the 4D rules for threatened species and where the forestry connection is a little bit here. This language just refers to section 4 of the Act, which is the determination section, how we determine if a species is threatened or endangered. And 4D allows for species-specific rules tailored to the conservation needs of a species. So it can specify any of the prohibitions, and it may include exceptions to the prohibition of incidental take. So in years past, typically just everything that was in there applied to endangered species, also applied to threatened. And more recently, the Fish and Wildlife Service has been crafting specific 4D rules for threatened species. So if activities are done as specified in the 4D language, then there's no need for an incidental take permit. And examples of these types of activities would be species conservation efforts by state conservation agencies, stream restoration, and recently some forest activities have been included. So why would we accept that prohibition of incidental take? And the reason is because we expect these activities that are in these rules to have a net conservation benefit for the species. So keeping forest lands forested and working for the landscape is very important for species. So one reason I was asked to mention this is because there is a new forestry 4D exception for Neuse River water dog. And this is one of those species that occur in the Tar and Neuse basins. So if you're working in that area, it's good to be aware of that. Just like I've kind of talked about what the species needs are, this provides clarity on those species conservation needs. So for instance, in that Clean Water Act BMP, it just says essentially don't harm species, but if you don't know what they need, you don't know how to manage for them. So we try to provide some detail that helps. And this was developed with forestry stakeholder involvement through the public comment process while the species was going through listing. And so we worked with state agencies and industry voices and several others. You'll notice, I'll share them in just a moment. So this species was listed just last week, by the way, it was finalized. These are outcome-based and they're specific but not prescriptive. So you choose what needs to be done on the landscape to meet the outcomes. We've also crafted the same draft language for the overlapping Atlantic pigtoe species, which is that mussel I said was proposed threatened, and we expect to be finalized in the next couple of months. So in this case, we wanted to make management as easy as it could be, and they're both benthic species, and so they have a lot of common needs, and so the language is the same. You'll also recognize that as I share them, that the specified conditions align with North Carolina's forest practice guidelines. So they should be very familiar and essentially things that you're already accustomed to doing. So in the spirit of transparency, I've chopped out the language of the forestry 4D exception for Neuse River water dog from this new listing rule. And I'm not going to ask you to squint or read all this. So I'll just basically tell you it says to establish SMZs, prevent sedimentation, maintain native vegetative ground cover in the SMZs, limit stream crossings, and when you need them, design them well. keep vehicles and logging decks, et cetera, out of the SMZs. Don't obstruct stream flow. Maintain shade to help maintain temperature, and don't pollute. So I'd like to wrap up my time talking to you today to introduce this partnership program that we and the North Carolina Forest Service worked on together. We're calling this a Foresters for Healthy Waters program. And this is a time-limited, localized pilot program in a 7-county area of the Upper Tar, largely the Upper Tar River Basin. There's a couple of other basins captured in there a little bit. And this offers cost share for pre-harvest plans as a reimbursement for landowners. It promotes ideal forest management, which protects aquatic species in their habitat. So all those squiggly blue lines are critical habitat areas in need of protection. And so these watersheds are really important for managing the conservation of several species. This program had an educational training just a couple of weeks ago on June 3rd. It's recorded and available through NC State's webinar system. And I think there are plans to have some of it posted on the North Carolina Forest Service website. The attendees are certified plan writers for this program now. They can write these plans. And the program begins with eligibility for reimbursement for landowners on July 1st. You can find a lot more information about the program at the NC Forest Service's website. They're administering the program. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service provided over $80,000 to get this started. So we hope landowners and foresters are receptive to this. It's a non-regulatory cooperative tool to help manage forest and species. And so we'll see what happens in this 2-year pilot and see if we can expand it if it's useful to you. So this area in particular, I've kind of alluded to it a couple times, contains key high quality habitats that are really important for conservation strategies for many species. It's really essential to preventing extinction for some of our most critically imperiled species, like the Carolina mad tom, which was just listed last week, and the Tar River spiny mussel. These are a couple that keep me up at night or have the potential to anyway. It's also important for recovery of several other species and state listed critters that are in this area. And so foresters and landowners are really important partners in these efforts. So if I could summarize everything that I just talked about today, several topics, North Carolina waters support many federally listed and at-risk species, and many of those are endemic to a very narrow range and specialized habitats in our state or localized watersheds. Many streams, especially in Eastern North Carolina, are designated as critical habitat for recovery of these species. They have their own needs, of course, but some common needs include clean flowing water, oxygen, and good stream habitat. And stressors are sedimentation, impoundments for some, impaired water quality, and invasive species. And so you can see how your efforts play an important role in keeping our habitats in good shape. And I hope the Fish and Wildlife Service can help foresters support good aquatic habitat and stewardship. We offer technical guidance. You can just send me an email if you like, or use our web-based tools like IPAC and the Critical Habitat Mapper that I gave you just a little preview of. And also check out this partner program with the North Carolina Forest Service. It incentivizes good planning and management, and hopefully it's a win-win for forest landowners and aquatic species. So thank you so much for your attention, and thanks again for the invitation to engage with you today.
Thank you, Jen. We got just a couple of minutes for questions if folks want to either unmute themselves or post that in the chat. Thank you, Tom, for posting some of the links that Jen was talking about through her presentation. I think the program, the Foresters for Healthy Waters, is definitely a win-win. I hope you guys think that as well. So I'll open the floor up here to questions.
I'm trying to scan the chat as well to see.
Jennifer, this is Sean Brogan with the North Carolina Forest Service. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
Don't have a question, but just wanted to thank you personally for the good partnership in terms of trying to come up with reasonable 4D rules. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. And this has all been a learning process for me too. As Michael mentioned in my introduction, I've only been here a year. So a year ago, I was trying to figure out what a 4D rule was myself. So it's been really great to engage with all of you. And I also had nothing invested in the efforts to that point. So it was easy for me to be objective and kind of understand all points of view.
There's a question in the chat here about Western North Carolina and the Appalachian elk toe. If you want to try and explain a little bit more on that, if you have any knowledge on that species.
A little more on the Western NC habitat. Yeah, so this species is largely in the French Broad Basin, and I will have to defer to my Western North Carolina partners, Jay Mays and Andrew Henderson, up there in the mountains. I've been so involved in listing processes, especially with the Mad Tom, Pigtoe, and Water Dog, that I haven't devoted a ton of time to learning about all the other species yet. But yeah, this is a species been listed for a really long time. It's also in the South Toe River area, and I apologize if I don't remember if that's also in the French Broad or in a different basin. But it's in the western flowing basin, so that those that flow to the interior Tennessee River Basin, so not in those basins that flow to the Atlantic slope. I know that there was a 5-year review recently done, so that's something that the Fish and Wildlife Service is mandated to do on a regular basis for all listed species, is review their status. And all that sort of information for a species can be found on that ECOS site that I mentioned, ecos.fws.gov. All of our species, and there's a search box right there. You can type in a common name and it'll bring you up to a species and shows all the Federal Register documents, 5-year reviews and that sort of thing. I do know that that species was still considered in decline a couple years ago when the most recent 5-year review was conducted. But they are essentially, they're in low numbers, but I think are occupying a fair amount of the French Broad main stem at this point.
Very good. I really appreciated the life cycle of the mussels. I had no idea.
Most people don't. They're pretty amazing critters for being rocks with guts, and I could talk to you longer than you want to about that probably. I do see one last question, or one more question anyway that I spotted so far. Mark asked, have I engaged paddlers, kayakers, and other water recreation users to any success in the upper tar? And I have a little bit. So in the short amount of time I've been here, I am involved in a group called the Upper Tar Collaboration, which is it's just a way for natural resource managers and others to kind of get together in that area. And we have recently invited the district foresters to come. I think our next meeting is maybe October, but we'd be happy to have you all along as well. But the Wildlife Commission and us, Tar River Land Conservancy, but also Sound Rivers, the River Keeper attends these meetings. And so they did a tour.
On my phone.
Oops, sorry, I think we've got another mic on. But they recently did last year a tour to Tar where they paddled, and I did a kind of an interview outreach with those folks to kind of let them be aware of the resource and what good water quality means for these species. So like I said at the beginning, engagement with partners is important. The Fish and Wildlife Service cannot do this on our own. And most lands are in private holdings. So it's really building those partnerships that I would love to focus on as I work through my career.
Thank you, Jennifer. We're pushed up against time now, and we'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break. I know I need one really quickly. if you guys want to, you can chat on here, but we'll start back at, what is it, 10:10. Let's start back at 10:20. 10:20, we'll start back. And we'll start back sharp at 10:20. So we'll see you all back here then. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks again.
Good job.
Thanks, Mark. Let's continue these chats later on. But I wanted to give an opportunity to Tom Davidson here very quickly to put in a plug. So Tom, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, AJ. Yeah, I'm excited to be involved with the APSAF Leadership Academy. You'll read more about it in the Trailblazer, but we feel we had a pretty good success with the online version in the fall. It was looked at nationally, got a lot of looks. One is looking at that model for themselves out in the Southwestern United States. But one of the things that we just couldn't overcome, no matter how hard we worked to do it, was what we missed in terms of the in-person experience. And so that was certainly a big part of our feedback. And there were many other things too that we learned from. Nonetheless, so the planning team of APSAF went back to the drawing board, looked at several options, decided to make this in person this year. And as things were opening up, we now have it scheduled for a Haw River State Park, fairly centrally located for the APSAF footprints, September 20th through 23rd. So this is going to be in person. It's going to be a full immersion experience. Our program last year was full immersion, but it was stretched out over 10 weeks. This will be 4 days. So folks will arrive middle of the day on Monday and leave middle of the day on Thursday. In between, packed agenda. There'll be a preview overview. There'll be an in-person get to know you session before we get together, so we hit the ground running. All right, we're going to cover all of your favorite topics, plus we're adding diversity, equity, and inclusion to the mix with Sam Cook and myself. There's a new feature. We're going to continue mentoring after this year's program. Very popular, very appreciated, I think, by everyone. The new addition is going to be projects. So folks coming through the Leadership Academy are going to get a chance to apply what they learned in service to the forestry community. All right, look for more information. The price point is going to be under $200 for members and a little bit more than that for non-members. If you want more information, 1 second left, AJ. I'm putting my email here on the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I will say that I did gain a lot out of it. And I would encourage you to, if you're interested in leadership at all, or just want to advance your career, I would certainly support that and support attending Tom's workshops there.
Thanks, AJ.
We'll go ahead and move into, I've got to do 2 of these now. 2 prize giveaways. The one that we missed was from the North Carolina Forestry Association, John Hatchers, to thank for that. And the second one is courtesy of the division, the North Carolina Division of SAF. So we'll go ahead and quickly do a couple of these numbers. 93 and 21. So that is Susan and is Stephen Mims. Okay, so I will make note of those and get you guys as your prizes. Next up, we have Cal Oakley. He is going to introduce our next speaker. Cal, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, AJ. Morning, everybody. My name's Cal Oakley. I'm a forestry student at Duke, and today I'm introducing Terry Baker. Originally from Marianna, Florida. Hope I'm saying that right. Terry Baker is the CEO of the Society of American Foresters. Prior to his selection as SAF CEO in 2018, Terry served in various roles within the USDA Forest Service. His almost 20-year federal career started in his home state of Florida on the Apalachicola National Forest. From there, he held positions on several other national forests in the western and southeastern U.S. He's been a wildland firefighter, forester, and administrator for over 1 million acres. Baker earned a master's degree in forest management and policy from Yale University in 2007, a bachelor's degree in forest resources and conservation at the University of Florida in 2004, and was honored by University of Florida as one of their 40 under 40 alumni in 2019. He also holds a bachelor's degree in agriculture sciences from Florida A&M University.
Thanks so much, Cal. And AJ and everyone that here in North Carolina, it's great to be with you all. Looking forward to when we can be there in person. And so just want to jump into several ideas and thoughts. The title of this talk is focused on, our SAF being poised for the future. And I think that as an organization we are, and we're continuously getting our footing under us and looking at how we move forward. I hate that I missed John Hatcher's talks. We've had a couple of conversations about what it means to jump into one of these roles and try to figure your way out, how to make it all work. And I just heard Mark talking about that. And it really is, it's a whole different language and a lot of unique things. Nonprofit governance is like nothing that I think I've ever experienced. And I don't know if I ever want to experience again, but it's always an opportunity to learn. So my main talk today is going to be about, several key things that are going on with our organization. But most importantly, I want to leave some time for questions from all of you later on. So I want to just jump into a few things, talk about some items, and then really just let folks ask questions and have a good back and forth. So basically where I see us as an organization going forward, there's a lot of moving pieces and some really good updates with all of our programming actually. As we've added some staff, there's been a lot of staff attrition and turnover in the last several years. So trying to provide some stability with our national staff and get us moving in a direction. So many of you are aware that of course we have our accredited programs. I believe we're sitting at roughly 77, maybe up to 79 accredited programs across the country. And with that, we've been reviewing our accreditation standards. So a lot of really good feedback over the last couple of years. And the plan is by the end of this year, that will all be wrapped up. We'll have a newly published accreditation handbook. And so I think that's one of the core pieces of what we do as SAF is work with our academic institutions and our employers and students and have conversations about, what does this look like? How is the world changing in academia? How's it changing for employers and what they're looking for from new graduates and what skills they need to have? And so I think we've had a lot of really good dialogue and ways to make that process more efficient. And so I know folks will see that when they see the new accreditation standards. So that's a big one for us. So we're really excited about getting that process wrapped up and how we'll improve that process. Then, of course, we have a lot going on from the policy arena. As Mark mentioned, there's a group of National Forestry Association executives that meet monthly at this point, actually. And it was interesting, prior to the pandemic, we met once a year. And then, of course, with the pandemic, we could meet virtually and met quite often to engage on various issues impacting the forestry sector. So that's been, and we've maintained that now, even though things are lightening up. I'm sure we'll meet in person at some point, but if not, we continue our monthly calls to talk about various issues and various policy issues. Obviously, SAF is a big player, and I won't necessarily say big player, but a constant player in all those conversations related to what's going on. We've been heavily involved, obviously, with some of the trillion tree legislation. We just released a new position statement on forest research, and we've got a few more coming out in the not too distant future. So keep an eye on social media and also just on the eForester, as we'll see a lot of these announcements. And I actually would want to take a quick moment to mention that for our Committee on Forest Policy, really excited about how that group has performed. For many years, our Committee on Forest Policy was really focused on revising our old position statements, which is the core responsibility of that group. But in the past 2 to 3 years, there's been more of a proactive approach in looking at our older position statements and saying, are there other issues that we should be talking about and having national positions on? Also, within some of these bigger, older position statements, are there more specific things that we should take out of them and have a separate position statement for? So So that's happening more and more. We had one not too long ago on forest recreation. And so, you know, a lot of really good conversations and information. And a reminder for those, this is baseline information, a lot of good research associated with these position statements, but they are meant to be national. So if a state society or a local chapter wants to create something more focused on a geographic area and build off of that position statement, then that's what they're there for. But if nothing else, there's a national foundation for SAF's position on various issues. So really excited about that. We've been in touch quite a bit with the new administration related to just their overall transition team, and then also related to the 30 by 30 initiative that the administration has brought forward, and also recently on the appropriations legislation as well. So again, lots of information to take, process, and spit back out, but we've been doing a good job of keeping track of all of that. We actually just brought on our policy intern for the summer, and her name is Arietta, and she's from Michigan State. So the policy world is very, very busy and pretty exciting for us. Did want to say that we have also the within professional development, just heard Tom talking about the leadership conference, or the leadership training and workshop. Lots going on there. Different projects that we're working on within professional development and certification, and seeing some good progress. Obviously, the different courses and things that we offer on Forest Ed, constantly looking for new partners to provide content on that platform, and continue to see the numbers rise for folks taking advantage of that resource, and having some broader conversations with some other partners based on the feedback that we're getting from folks, especially starting last year with working groups and having more specialized webinars that we're putting on with our working groups. That's definitely started to resonate with folks a lot more. Goodness, I think we've had few of those. We've had 200 to 300 folks participating at a time. So the working group webinars are definitely going to continue, and looking forward to the variety of things that we see coming from them. More so in the certification world, many of you probably are aware that handful of years ago, SAF purchased the rights to an urban forestry credential, urban and community forestry credential from it's from a California Urban Forestry Coalition council. And so we've been having some really good conversations this year, working in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and a couple of other organizations to actually conduct a market analysis on, is there a space for a national urban and community forestry credential? And what would folks be looking for, especially because there are so many credentials that exist in that space. When you think of landscape architects, certified arborists, urban planners, and the list goes on and on, municipal arborists, municipal specialists. So something that we're taking a very thoughtful approach to, and having some really good conversations. Several folks across the country were interviewed as practitioners, a lot of research analysis, and we've been meeting with a advisory group. And so I saw that Katie Fernholz may still be on the call. She serves as the leader of our advisory group to have some of those conversations, and looking forward to making a presentation to the board of directors later this year about whether we should move forward or not with that, and what that means for us organizationally. So again, looking towards the future, looking at the reality that managing forests across the spectrum, both from very, very urban settings to also very, very rural settings, is all part of what we do and what we represent as SAF. And so looking forward to seeing what those answers are going to be, and what that means for us going forward. Speaking of going forward, there'll be some information coming out, actually maybe today, if not definitely tomorrow. The board of directors and the staff just completed a strategic plan for SAF for the next 4 to 5 years. Really excited about pulling us down from a really high level of what was done a few years ago with the 5 pillars, and bringing that into some strategic goals and objectives that we can really start to focus on annual plans for us, and improve our annual planning. So that's been a great exercise. It's been really helpful. It's brought quite a bit of clarity for a few different things, and just making sure we name them specifically, and how we want to move forward on those. So there'll be a summary and some information shared with all of our members over the next couple of days. And really looking forward to diving into that and really tying the work that we do back to that strategic plan to keep us on track. With that, we're looking a lot at our ability to, one of our major concerns organizationally is our membership. It's all of you. It's how we all work together. It's how we all experience SAF and support the profession. And so we looked at a few different ways. That's something that's come up in our strategic planning efforts. It's something that's come up in various feedback and forums. How do we look at recruiting new members? How do we also look at retaining the members that we have? And so looking at different ways to really inform that decision-making process. A couple of things that are on the horizon for us is one in particular is that we have a request for proposals out for a consultant to work with us on an in-depth membership analysis, to look at the structure, to look at the value proposition, to look at all these things and help us from that perspective. And we'll be engaging, various folks along the way to help inform that process for us as well, to really help us make some strategy decisions going forward, looking at, how we grow our membership, and again, how we retain members, and ultimately, like Cal said, I'm from Florida, so it's, I grew up around that whole concept of just how you take care of people, and that's an important part of what we do. Oftentimes, it's the forests that bring us together as members of SAFs, but we're a group of people. So how do we take care of each other? How are we thoughtful? And I know we do a lot of that, but it's it's something we can always improve on. So we're looking forward to getting some feedback on that. That was also one of the key aspects of working with our Molly Baby Scholar, Jamie Dahl, and the inclusion engagement survey that she sent out. So if you haven't had a chance to participate in that, give some feedback, then please do. And it's just one of those things, another piece of, again, how do we learn what's going on within the organization? And oftentimes, we travel in our own circles, and we know who we know, and most everything works out okay. But sometimes those unfortunate instances and challenges, and how do we look at how we improve those? So we're looking forward to her data and what we learned from that as well. And again, just overall, how do we improve our organization and make it more meaningful to folks? I mentioned earlier, meeting with Mark and meeting with other association executives, that ability to work with partners, I think, is crucial. There are a lot of forestry organizations out there and in this space. And so how we leverage our voices is something that's really critical to engaging, especially policymakers, but just in general. For those who may not be aware, SAF is a member of Forest Proud. I actually sit on their board. And it's, I think, again, the just important messaging and things like that, and being really creative in how we present forests and forestry and natural resource management as positive light as possible, and reaching broader audiences is something that's so key. So, working with those partners, I think, is something that's really important to us. Obviously, now we find ourselves in the same building as SFI, but working with that organization and a lot of the work that they're doing, in particular with Project Learning Tree, and where there's partnership opportunities with SAF, and looking at what we can do together. There's a few things going on in that arena. One, the Green Jobs Career Guide was something that we supported nationally and helped to create and disseminate that career guide. So really proud of that. And you'll see our logo on the back of that Green Jobs Guide. So so we have that opportunity. And then I would also say the one piece that's upcoming is that SFI and PLT are working with MANRS, the Minorities in Agriculture and Natural Resource Related Sciences, on an African American Voices in Green Careers or Green Jobs, or type of guide, and to share information on that. And so I sit on a steering committee working on that project right now. This is based off of something they did in Project Learning Tree and SFI created in Canada with Indigenous voices. And they're looking at possibly doing a whole series here in the US on various diverse groups that tend to be not as well represented within forestry and natural resources. So again, showcasing stories and journeys and experiences and what that means to different audiences. So really excited to be a part of that group as well. And a part of that conversation and what it brings to our profession and what it brings to an organization for us like SAF. And then also, I think the ability to engage new organizations and partners that we don't normally engage with, I think is always an opportunity to consider and look at. And see where there's going to be alignment and where we can take advantage of that and bring a voice of foresters and forestry to the table, and also just raise awareness. And so I've had a couple of opportunities to do that just within this year, actually. Earlier this year, there was a presentation in the panel I was asked to participate on related to the Green Biz, the 2021 Green Biz meeting, which is really focused on sustainability and corporate sustainability. And was a panel just talking about forests as a climate solution, something that sounds like there's been a few conversations about this morning already. So great opportunities to engage there with a lot of, again, corporate sustainability folks from all over the country and in some cases the world. So that was really informative, and developed some different opportunities for us as well, and for me to engage SAF in a different audience that actually ended up growing into an opportunity that I have for tomorrow, which is speaking about forests and climate and Western fires tomorrow with the American Bar Association. So wish me luck. It's going to be an interesting crowd to sit and talk to a bunch of lawyers about forestry and about and all within like 9 minutes, I think is the allotted amount of time. So definitely some unique things coming up, but again, we are as SAF and as foresters and natural resource managers, there's more and more interest in what we do and our ability to speak in those spaces and really embrace that this is part of our reality. I think is going to really benefit us as a whole. And I think that we're seeing that more and more various organizations and opportunities. So really excited about where we are as SAF, some of the hard questions that we're asking ourselves. And, that whole ability to say, are we going to look at challenges as shortcomings, or we're going to look at those challenges as opportunities, and where can we build as a whole organization? Oftentimes when especially in this role, I've heard the phrasing of, SAF national, and almost kind of like it's this ethereal thing off far away from all of you. The entirety of SAF is what's truly important. And that's something that I really am proud to be a part of. And we have some paid staff, and we have a lot of volunteer leaders, and we have a lot of members, and we all are part of the solution for this organization and representing professional foresters and scientific-based management. So I'm really looking forward to what we can do and what we have done, how we build on the great history that we have as an organization with 121 years, and also our projection and our ability to look at the next 121 years and what we'll do from here. So with that, I will stop talking at you and let you start asking me some questions. Really grateful to be a part of this. And again, I know the opportunity and what's most important and exciting for all of us is to meet in person. And right now we're meeting virtually, and I really do applaud all of you for taking the time to meet virtually. And I know you're looking forward to getting back to being in person. So it's been an interesting year to 18 months for all of us, but it looks like we're on the back end of this thing. So excited to get out and see everybody again.
Thank you. It does look like we have a couple of questions in the chat box here. Any initial input from Colorado State online questionnaire that you'd be willing to share?
Well, we don't have the nothing yet. I know that I think we're going to have it that open for a little while longer as far as the survey goes, but no major, nothing's been shared just yet. I do think we have about, I think we're somewhere close to 900 respondents. So we've had that's a good number of respondents. Of course, more is always better. But I did hear that from Jamie, actually, I think just yesterday, that we're up to just under 900 respondents on that survey.
Another question in here was, there was mention green jobs brochure. Is that available on the national website?
Actually, that's available through SFI and Project Learning Tree. It's officially in a Project Learning Tree course, learning packet.
Very good. And I'd like to open up the floor if anyone wants to unmute and have a conversation here in front of everybody with Terry.
Hi, Terry. I just have a quick question. You mentioned increasing membership and value to members, and I was just wondering if there's been any consideration to opening up the certified forester, the certification to graduates of two-year school, of accredited two-year schools from their forestry programs.
That is a great question. We haven't talked a lot about that, but that is something I know that there is some level of discussion about with the Certification Review Board. I can't speak a whole lot in detail to that, but I can definitely take that question back to them. I know it's been talked about a few different times, so definitely something we can continue to look at.
I'll throw something out to you, Terry. Just so you know, your name there says SAF National, so we're going to keep calling you that. But you mentioned briefly at the beginning the word governance, and as you know, we've talked a lot about that with APSAF being a complex and a good place for us to kind of work on this. We have been working on it, and you've also grabbed that bull by the horns there at National. Could you just say a little bit more about that on the national end of things and prop us up as you do?
Most definitely. So, so yes, in the world of governance and also business structure for us as an organization, you know, the reality is that, you know, we're a big organization with a long history. And so in a lot of ways, we get grandfathered into things as rules and regulations change. And so, you know, there's no better way to put it than that's caught up with us. And there's just been various challenges here and there, some within APSAF, some of those same issues that have happened in APSAF have happened at a couple of other units that we're becoming more and more aware of, related to, you know, tax ID numbers and just business structure, the concept of incorporating units versus in the representative states, and the list goes on and on. So a lot of complex things to really figure out. And so one of the things that we've done is that we've actually brought on new legal counsel to help work through this, not only from a national, from a national perspective, looking at all of SAF, but also from the standpoint of looking at it related to each of our state societies. So, so there's a lot of really good work going on to really start to clean that up and clarify what works and what doesn't, both from our units and our members' standpoints and our volunteer leader standpoint, as well as from a law, regulation, and policy standpoint. And so really wanting to work through that, create the clarity that we need to create, so that we can all operate and operate, you know, safely and responsibly. I mean, I think that that's what everyone wants to do. But, you know, we you know, once you know, I think that was one of the things from Adam, like once you know, you can't unknow it. So you really have to put some energy into, like, you know, getting things up to standard. So that's something we're going to be putting a lot of energy into over the next several months, and getting that cleaned up is really crucial. And again, a big thanks to the folks in APSAF for bringing those issues to the forefront and providing a very, very detailed briefing paper that really helped us better understand some issues that we need to look at for everyone, and we started to get those stories, and they were very similar. So obviously things that we needed to address. So so yeah, just working towards better governance, insurance, and entity, you know, organizational structure type pieces that we need to have in place for us.
Thank you, Terry. That's good stuff. Just so you all know, you probably know the name Lori Razor. She actually likes this stuff, so it's really great that she's part of this process at the national level and supporting state societies, of which APSAF, of course, is one. But thanks, Terry, for those comments.
Sure thing. Yeah, you caught me on the SAF National. Someone made this Zoom account, and they're just like, well, just use this one. I'm like, this is not where I'd like to be, but all right. But it's better than, there's obviously, you know, the logo that's up there in the corner, and that's in my signature block. There was an issue where I emailed, I think it was John McNulty when he was president, and he had his settings set to just text. So the graphic didn't come through, either the name of the graphic or something, but it was just like, but it ended up reading, you know, Terry Baker, SAF icon. And I'm like, well, that's great. Yeah. You don't need an ego when everything around you creates your ego for you. So it's never a dull moment. Looks like in the chat we have any more thoughts about the urban forestry credential. I don't know is Katie still on? I'd love to put Katie on the spot.
Hey, Terry, happy to do it. Yeah, I'm grateful to be working with you on urban forestry, and just all I would say is I think we've all been watching this space evolve. I think it's exciting. I think there's a leadership opportunity for SAF, and so stay tuned. How's that for a comment, Terry? But
no, I think it's really good discussions, a lot of really good information, and I mean just a growing body of research related to what professionals experience in the space and what skills they feel like they wish they would have had. And I mean, that's across the board. I mean, and I think that's a really important piece for me when I look at this is you'll have landscape architects who wish they had a broader forestry knowledge, arborists who wish they had more of an ecological look at things. We have certified foresters and foresters who wish they better understood the landscape architecture and the urban planning piece. So I mean, it's all around that there's these various niche responsibilities and certain credentials and backgrounds that operate in urban spaces, but oftentimes they're asked to do something across multiple disciplines that they may not have a strong background in. So how do you really start to craft that? And is there a need for that? So that's really a lot of where the conversation is grounded in. Actually, we'll be having our third conversation this afternoon after this call. So unfortunately, I won't be able to stay with you as long as I'd like. But yeah, no, it's a great opportunity to have the conversation and also to look at it from a collaborative approach versus just walking in and saying, hey, we've got a new credential and making enemies out of a lot of folks. Doesn't mean there won't be competition and some rubs there, but if we decide to move forward, then we're working towards really keeping folks informed and engaged along the process and along the way. Okay, let's see. Strategic planning, wildlife society, ecological society, soil society. Yes, so the strategic plan is actually wrapped up, but when we look at the strategic plan around membership, there'll definitely be some of those discussions. I think that we as an organization quite a few years ago voted, and most folks, I don't know if they really remember that vote, to change our bylaws. And if you look at our bylaws and what it means to be a professional member and what qualifies you to be a professional member of SAF, it's pretty broad. It's not just having a degree, not just having a forestry degree from an accredited forestry program, but it really is defined as a broad field of forestry. So that that includes your soil scientists, your wildlife biologists, your ecologists, and just go down the list. And I think that we haven't necessarily really spoke to the fact that we haven't really spoke to that. And I think that there's also a lack of ownership of that for us, for some of our members, and definitely for folks who look at us from outside of the organization. So, and I'll give you a great example. Hopefully she won't be too mad at me for this, but I met the Pennsylvania State Forester fairly recent, a couple of years ago, and it was right after she was appointed to that role. And when I met her, she's like, I'm so excited, I'm finally a member of SAF. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, I figured you'd let me in now that I'm a state forester, but I have a degree in conservation and sustainability, and I never applied because I didn't think I would be accepted. So it's just like that. In that moment, I'm like, all right, we've really got to work on this. So it's a whole piece for us as an organization to look at, to really own the decisions that have been made and create those opportunities. One thing I didn't mention is we'll also later this month, early next month, we will be rolling out information on a membership campaign. on an opportunity to provide, everything from short videos to content and information for all of our members to go out and recruit. And that's something that's really important to our current president, Gene Kadama. And it's important to me as well. And so as we work on a lot of these structural background pieces, the ability to continue to look at ways to bring folks in. And there's a part of that of what the paid staff do that helps to create that member value, but a lot of that comes from all of you. It's each individual. I don't even think of it as the CEO, like me as an individual in the past, maybe about two to 3 months, I recruited about 6 or 7 new members. And it's just having a conversation and demystifying SAF and tell them that you don't have to be a certified forester to be a member or to have continuing education credits to be a member, or just look at different ways that they can plug in and be engaged in the organization. And several of these folks, probably about half, are completely new to the organization, and the other half are folks who rejoined and because they felt like again, they didn't have a place for whatever reason. So just being willing to have that conversation with folks and bring them back into the fold and having talk to them about being part of the solution and helping improve the organization is probably by far one of the most important things we can say to someone about being an SAF member. So that will be rolling out soon. Also, if you if you are interested in giving a testimonial, either a couple of sentences or also doing a short video, if you're so inclined, about why SAF is important to you, or just a great story about being an SAF member, you can definitely send that into Elizabeth Buell on our staff. Some of you may know Elizabeth from her time with Virginia Forestry Association. I'll put her email in the chat, but she'd love to add more stories, and we're going to be doing a promotional video and just have a lot of fun with it. I mean, that's that piece of remembering why we all are part of SAF and what we enjoy. That's the foundation for our water cooler conversation next week with myself and the officers. Is let's focus on the positive. We've got challenges. Every organization has challenges. I individually have challenges, but we also have a lot of opportunity. We have a lot to be proud and excited about. So just a chance to talk about that and give feedback, just like I'm doing now. But hopefully you can make it to the water cooler. I don't know. I may have said everything that you might have questions about today, but yeah, the membership campaign drive is something that we're really excited about. Just getting the word out there. Because I think a lot of folks don't even know what SAF's doing these days. And that's something that I really have been working on with the staff. How do we communicate better to our members and then outside of our membership to be attractive to other folks? Other questions?
There was a question about membership levels here. I think it's getting answered by Adam.
Yeah, where we are membership at this point.
Well, I've got a question, I guess. I'll come up with one here. What are the top 2 or 3 things that local chapters can do to support your efforts at the national level?
That's a good question. I think that I think first and foremost, the last comment I made about the membership campaign. I think the ability just to get out and talk to folks, share your experiences, because that's what's genuine in SAF. And you can be honest about it. I mean, I wouldn't dwell on any of the bad things, but admit that there are some challenging times, and that happens. I think next to that, I'd say be open to change. I mean, we're experiencing a lot of change in staff, getting the strategic plan out there, changing a few other things nationally, putting some programs in place. And while doing that, it's a lot of folks who are really intent on this organization moving in a positive direction and delivering our programs more efficiently and effectively. And so, as you see new things, don't hesitate to ask. If you see something you don't like, you can definitely share that as well. And that's the thing. We have a wide spectrum of members. That's part of what makes us as great of an organization as we are, and what everyone brings to the table. So where something might please someone, it might upset someone else, and we're conscious of that and thoughtful of that, but that's also part of our reality. So, don't hesitate to share, the good and the bad, but be open to, folks who are working towards, the good of the organization. And I think if nothing else, continue to meet, continue to engage, continue to grow, learn from each other, and have fun. I mean, it's the same thing I tell my staff. It's just like, we've got a lot of work to do. We keep really busy, but there's nothing that says we can't have fun while we do it. So, oftentimes when we think about, when we talk to students, actually, there's this aspect of a forestry club and SAF, and it depends. Some universities are split, some universities are together, or technical schools are together. But oftentimes, SAF is seen as the serious, responsible kind of group that you hang out with, and forestry club is a group you go like drink a beer and have fun with. So that reminder that you can have fun in SAF. There is, again, a lot of professional speakers and things that you do for your professional networking, your career growth. But it is also, the enjoyment of being a part of an organization of folks that believe in the importance of forests and forest management and what it means for society as a whole. So just remember to have fun with it.
Good advice. So I think we're going to try and have some fun tomorrow on our field tour of the Shank Forest and after hours too. So, are there any other questions? Go ahead and unmute yourself, and we got just a couple more minutes for Terry.
While folks are thinking of questions, AJ. Oh,
I got one for you.
Yes, sir.
Jerry, have you got some real interesting lead recruitment things that you can share? There must be a chapter or society that's leading and not diminishing. And then secondary, do you have a list of those that have lapsed? And can a chapter get access to what might have been members that we could reach out to and maybe bring them back into the fold? Thank you.
Sure. Great question. So that's a good question on the, we haven't looked at that from an analysis perspective. We'll do a little digging on if anyone's having particularly related to them growing versus declining, or maybe declining at a lower rate. The thing I will say is that for your membership folks at the state level, and for you that may be APSAF, I'm not sure about your state divisions, those folks, actually state divisions should have access to Leadership Central. And so within Leadership Central, the membership rosters will have active and lapsed members that are in there. So there should be a list of folks. I will tell you that one of the things that we started doing with the eForester was that we actually started sending that out to all of the lapsed members, in addition to all of our members. And it was one of those things where, because we're starting to put more updates about, it's all, articles that are online anyway, is the bulk of the eForester. Then we've started putting more and more updates about what's going on with SAF, kind of as that lead in. And so with that, we thought it would be a great piece to just continue to send to folks, and, maybe they start seeing some things that they like and see that as a means of coming back to the organization as well. So just one of those things that's fairly, straightforward, and it's a click of a button and it's off to the races. So, so with that, that's definitely something that we've done, but yeah, some of those times it's really a personal touch. Sometimes, I know Kentucky, Tennessee has quite the music and mentoring effort that they do with students. And so, there's various programs out there, and how, folks are being more creative and finding solutions related to recruiting and or retaining folks. So, and we're looking at some different forums and how we can bring folks together around that.
Thank you. And if you were going to post Elizabeth's contact for us. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Any other final questions?
I'd like to personally thank you, Terry, for providing this opportunity to listen to you and hear what's going on at SAF. and how we can help you going forward.
Sure thing. Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
All right, well, if nothing else, I will say again, thanks. I'll be on for a little bit, but just a reminder that we're in DC, and make your way up there. Don't hesitate to stop by, and happy to take you on a tour of the office.
All right. Very cool. Madison, we're pushed up against time now. If we want to go ahead, we're going to go and play the different recorded videos for the lightning update of different statewide organizations here in North Carolina. But in the meantime, I'd like to put Henry Randolph on the spot if I can, and ask him to give a plug for the ethics webinar here if he's on the line.
I'm right here, AJ. And again, that's a topic that we all know that we can improve on, and we never get enough talking about ethics. And so the North Carolina Board of Registration decided it would be a good topic to put forth as a webinar. And we thank Bob for taking the being willing to host that this afternoon. And really and truly, it's an opportunity to get some continuing education credit before our North Carolina registrations are due here at the end of the month. But we think it's a great opportunity to come together, hear a presentation, a formal presentation on ethics for 1 hour. And then the board members will actually be presenting some case studies and answering questions, kind of a live session for the 2nd hour. So thank you, AJ, for giving me the opportunity to put in a plug.
Yeah, and that's later today.
From 1 until 3.
And if you want to put something in the chat that people can get to that if they want to, please do that.
I think it just popped up right now. Mark put that in for us. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Madison, if you want to unmute yourself and we can figure out how we can begin sharing these videos. If you need me to do that, let me know.
Sounds good. I think I should be able to get, you're going to start with NC State.
Okay. Very good. And I will also say that this concludes the session in which CFEs are applicable for. I've put that in the chat box for you guys that still haven't signed up. It looks like we got quite a few people that signed up, but I appreciate your participation in that, and shoot me an email if you got any questions about that.
Hello, everyone. AJ, the videos are not wanting to share.
Please bear with us as we figure out this technical difficulty.
I got it, AJ.
I'm Erin Sells, maybe a new face for many of you, because I've only been interim department head for a little less than a year now. But I'm sure all of you are familiar with our many forestry experts and activities. So what I want to focus on today is how these activities and our forestry expertise intersect with our larger department, including including all the other domains of environmental resources that we cover now. This is important because we have, of course, expanded quite a bit from our origins in forest management as we've added curricula. And the numbers in this slide show you the number of students enrolled in each of the curricula during the spring semester. So clearly now forestry is one of our smaller curricula, and the largest ones are environmental sciences and fish, wildlife, and conservation biology. So the students and the faculty that we have across all of these fields and curricula position us very well
to research and education at the interface of forest management and several other domains, including wildlife and conservation biology, water, and renewable energy. So to support that research and education and the synergies between forest management and other environmental resources and environmental issues, we've focused some of our hiring in the past year on two particular areas in forestry. First is forest health, where we've expanded and now have good expertise in both entomology and pathology. And second is an ecological silviculture, or what you might call conservation forestry, or perhaps carbon forestry. So again, new expertise, new faculty in both of those areas. But there's another way that forestry intersects with the rest of our department. And I really see the sort of core spirit of forestry and sustainable forest management as imbuing all that we do. I like to talk about this in terms of this definition of forestry. So everything that we do is based on science, but we also recognize always that there's a little bit of art and certainly always a business dimension to managing any type of environmental resource or aspect of the environment. Likewise, sustainability is core to everything that we do. And finally, all of it is driven by the need to meet people's goals, needs, and values. And this is fundamental motivation for all types of natural resource management and environmental management. Over the past year, the heightened attention to social justice issues has drawn attention to this last line here, and the need to make sure that we are considering everyone's goals, needs, and values when we're managing environmental resources. In forestry, I think that we know that, but we also know equally well that there are some groups that have been traditionally underrepresented and underserved, and we can do a better job of being more inclusive and make sure that we're considering all opinions, goals, stakeholders, values that impact on our choices about forest management. In the Department of Forestry and Environmental Resources, we're thinking about this through three lenses, perhaps is the way to put it. So first, the university's strategic plan very clearly calls on all of us to champion a culture of equity, diversity, inclusion, belonging, and well-being in all that we do. We are certainly prioritizing that in the department. I'd like to say more specifically, perhaps and more specifically to this audience, that we are interested in helping diversify the forestry profession in North Carolina. We think there are real benefits and real value in that goal. And we welcome your ideas and your collaboration in our efforts to bring greater diversity and inclusion into the forestry field. So the second lens on this brings up this term environmental justice that you've probably seen in the news. What I put on the slide here is from a request for public comment from the USDA on their new climate policy. This was posted at the beginning of the year and highlighted environmental justice as one of the themes and areas of concern. So making sure that we're meeting the needs of disadvantaged communities, and in this case, making sure that they have access to climate change adaptation solutions. In our department, we have faculty who are experts in environmental justice and graduate students who are doing really interesting and important research in this area. One of the tools that they use for this research is what I call participatory science. So our faculty use lots of different terms for this. Some lead programs in citizen science, others talk about community engaged research. No matter what the term, basically we're talking about engaging the public in our science and in our research. from the very beginning, from the definition of what questions we need to answer, to getting their help with data collection, to collaborative interpretation, and then finally application of our results. So we bring all three of these together in the Department of Forestry and Environmental Resources: diversity, equity, and inclusion in the department, environmental justice as a topic that we address through our research and our extension, and participatory science is a key tool that we use. And we're looking for the overlap and the synergy between these, and seeking to use that to further our goals in this area. So this is my last slide, basically. But before I wrap up, I did want to acknowledge that all of this has been more challenging over the past year. Just to take participatory science as an example, it's difficult to engage the public in your science when you can't have face-to-face meetings with anyone, right? And so we face those challenges, same as I'm sure all of you have. But I see the light at the end of the tunnel. NC State is opening back up, coming back onto campus. Our labs are open, our field research has started back up. We're expecting all of our faculty and students back in the classroom and in our field sites this fall. And we are really, really looking forward to it, as I'm sure all of you are also. Everyone will be happy to be back in person and able to talk to each other outside of our little Zoom boxes. Of course, I know that not all will be back to normal. So one of our next speaker here is going to be Madison, who is the president of the student chapter of SAF. And they typically go to the SAF National Convention, which of course is still going to be virtual this year. So we've been talking about ways that we could create more of a social experience around that, maybe having a watch party, inviting alumni in to come watch the convention with us and have an actual in-person social associated with that. So the last slide I'll put up is our contact information, my email and Madison's email. If you're an alumnus of our program and are interested in pursuing something like that around the SAF National Convention, please reach out to us. Likewise, if you got any other questions or suggestions for me, you have my email. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Bizarre. I am the chair for the NC State SAF chapter. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the events we had last year that went really well and what we're looking forward to in this upcoming year. Last year, we had around 15 students that graduated that were a part of the SAF chapter at NC State. We tried to meet at least once a month. Our meetings were limited to Zoom due to COVID-19. We had a lot of guest speakers come in through Zoom to talk about their industry and what they do day to day. And we also had a special topic that we talked about that we had a lot of participation in, which was our talk about carbon credits. And we're looking forward to maybe continuing that in this upcoming year. In this upcoming semester, we're looking forward to the national conference, which is now planned to be on Zoom, and possibly doing a local wilderness trip with SAF in North Carolina, whether that be towards the coast or towards the mountains. With the national conference in mind, we have some interest from students to meet together in one of our classrooms or in a big room, meeting room, to watch the conference together, to get that feel of community. And after the national conference, we're also looking forward to having other guest speakers come in, whether they be from the public, private, or government sector doing their jobs or whatever. Come in and talk to our students so they can get an idea what to look for once they graduate. Forestry Club is another responsibility that I carry. It doesn't have anything to do with SAF, but we did not have any events last year due to COVID-19. But we are looking forward to attending other Forestry Club events this coming year, competitions, and we're looking forward to hosting Rollia in upcoming November.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cal Oakley. I'm the current president of the Society of American Foresters Duke chapter. Here to just sort of update you on our past year. Like everywhere else, the pandemic significantly impacted what we were able to do. Unfortunately, we could not meet in person for nearly anything, but we met virtually online when possible. and just sort of tried our best to keep the fire alive here at the Nicholas School. That said, we're very excited about next year. Classes will be in person, and all classes will be in person, and hopefully all of our group activities will be as well. On the docket for next year, we have sort of drafting, formalizing, and distributing our group's mission statement, which has been something we've been discussing for a long time. We'd also like to host a forestry symposium next year. This is something that Duke has been known for in the past, and after this very quiet year, we think the time is ripe to sort of throw an event like this and get people from all different fields of the forestry community to come together and share knowledge and get to know each other. That's about it. Like I said, we're very excited for next year. Lots to do. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe and see if he has anything to add.
So thank you, Cal. I'm the faculty advisor to the Duke SAF chapter, and a very warm welcome to our incoming leadership. Not only Cal, who's our president, but also Jackie and Leidy, who may be here. It's great to see everyone. I'd also like to recognize our outgoing leadership, Michael Scott, Jack Elkhorn, and others, and many people who've chipped in both in front and behind the scenes over the last year. What I would like to say is that the Duke SAF chapter really is more than just a professional society. It's the clearinghouse for interest in forestry and forest activities at Duke. And it's a bit of a lifeline and the hub of activity surrounding that. More officially, this is an accreditation year for Duke. We will be going through all of that important work to maintain the accreditation of the program. Those who've been involved in such processes know how much work that is, but we're looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to supporting the students as they are part of our Appalachian Society SAF chapter. Happy to connect people with our students and look forward to engaging the rest of the Triangle chapter, North Carolina chapter, and the broader APSAF community.
Glad to see all of you today. Thanks, Joe. And yeah, anyone interested in engaging with us, please reach out. We are all about making connections, and because that's the biggest strength of this organization, I think, and we don't want to forget that. So thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Well, good morning, fellow SAF members. My name is Colby Lambert, and I work for Cooperative Extension as an area specialized forestry agent. Also serve as the Vice President of Education and Outreach for the North Carolina Tree Farm Program, and also serve on the board of the North Carolina Tree Farm Program. So this morning, I just want to give you an update on the Tree Farm Program here in North Carolina. We had our new certification standards go into effect on March 15th of this year. All inspectors must be trained to these new standards. So if you are an active tree farm inspector and have not had the training on these new standards, please contact Leslie McCormick. There is an online training available, and more information can be provided by Leslie. There are some new benefits for inspectors, including CFE credits, some new business discounts available. We have some new awards and forms of recognition that will be coming hopefully by the annual meeting this fall. There are also new member benefits, as you can see here, for North Carolina tree farm members. Each tree farm member will get a tree farm sign, a certificate. There is a tree farm binder available for tree farmers now, and that will include information on tools for their recording management activities, for monitoring observations, and recording pesticide use, which is now a part of our standards going in for the next 5 years. There are sections for filing a copy of our management plan, for contacts, receipts, equipment user manuals, and also contact information for natural resource professionals in that new binder. There's newsletters available for tree farmers. There's a 1-year subscription to the National Woodlands magazine for tree farmers. And then also priority registration for all of our programs and forest herb programs. And there is now a college scholarship available for children and grandchildren of our tree farm members for up to $500. And also right now there's grant funding available through September the 30th to help pay for the certification fee for landowners in counties impacted by Hurricanes Matthew and Florence. So please contact Leslie for more information on that. North Carolina Tree Farm is a partner and co-founder of the Forester NC program, if you haven't heard about that. This was established back in 2019. It's designed for women landowners and natural resource professionals, but is open to anyone interested in participating. Currently, we have over 1,000 people on our listserv. We have 623 followers on Facebook, 700 followers on Instagram, and we currently have webinars where we have 100 to 150 attendees at each of those webinars. For 2021, we had a series of 7 webinars ranging in topics from wildlife photography to recreational trails to enjoying your woods safely, information on hunting leases, boundary lines of trespassing, non-timber income, cost share assistance. And our last scheduled webinar will be July the 18th on property taxes and estate planning. So please go to the Forester NC Facebook page for more information on that. You can also view those webinars on our North Carolina Tree Farm Program website, which you can see here. This website, this is our new and improved website. And you can go here to get all the information on the Forester website. You can also get information on certification. There is a section for tree farmers and also recognitions and resources. You can also see learn about the tree farm program history, leadership, and also view our calendar. And we are hoping to have more in-person workshops and field tours in the coming future. But for more information, please visit the North Carolina Tree Farm website. And with that, I will say thank you and hope to have a good meeting. And thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, folks. My name is Sean Brogan. I've been with the North Carolina Forest Service since 1998, and I appreciate the opportunity to give an agency update today. Some of the highlights that I wanted to cover today included how the NCFS dealt with COVID-19 and the pandemic this past year, the recent drought, wildfires, and burn ban from April and May, an update on the State Fair forestry building that's being constructed, our 2020 Forest Action Plan, Some of the highlights that I wanted to cover today included how the NCFS dealt with COVID-19 and the pandemic this past year, the recent drought, wildfires, and burn ban from April and May, an update on the State Fair forestry building that's being constructed, our 2020 Forest Action Plan, some of the efforts related to prescribed burning, and also a shameless plug at employment opportunities with the agency. Like most organizations, the North Carolina Forest Service was significantly impacted by COVID-19. From the onset, we wanted to strike a balance and ensure the safety of our personnel and the public, while maintaining to the best of our abilities our core programs and services. I'm glad to report that many of the metrics that we use to track accomplishments, whether it's water quality inspections, management plans, cost share delivered, really did not dip when compared to historical years. Some of the biggest challenges, looking back, definitely relate to the outreach and the training that we do, including landowner tours, workshops, things like that, that were in person, as well as the incident response. For those of us that are on teams and respond to things like wildfires, having large groups of firefighters in close proximity was a challenge, and there had to be a lot of protocols developed to ensure safety. We also helped to staff the Greensboro mass vaccination site here in North Carolina that occurred for approximately 2 months and was a big positive in terms of getting more folks vaccinated. Now that we're turning the corner into the new fiscal year, I'm glad to report our state forests and educational state forests are now fully open, and we're really looking forward to getting some of the outreach and training back on the calendar. April and May brought increasing drought conditions to the eastern half of the state. Wildfire activity picked up, particularly in the southeastern portion and the Sandhills region, and we had some notable fires, including the Francis Fire on the Hoffman Forest. This particular fire involved organic soils and ultimately required over 1.6 million gallons of water to be moved in order to contain the incident. Toward the end of May, a burn ban was issued for the southeastern portion of the state, and we actually had to send over 100 NCFS staff down to that region to assist local units. Thankfully, the rains came in early June, and the burn ban was called off June 2nd. After a one-year break because of the pandemic, I'm happy to report the Great North Carolina State Fair will be back this fall. The big news is that forestry and soil and water exhibits will have a newly constructed building housing them. This will be an opportunity to showcase North Carolina's native trees and all the positives that forestry in North Carolina contribute. Some of you on the call today have previously assisted the North Carolina Forest Service in developing the state's Forest Action Plan. For those of you not familiar with this effort, the purpose behind the Forest Action Plans were to provide a statewide assessment of its forest resources and also list recommended actions that various stakeholders could take to ensure forest sustainability. Our initial Forest Action Plan was released in 2010, with a 5-year pulse check report being done in 2015. That 2015 report listed which of the recommended actions had been carried out. You can find this information at ncforestactionplan.com, as well as the draft 2020 update. This Forest Action Plan edition has been submitted to the U.S. Forest Service for final review. I expect that approval in the coming months, at which time we will reach out to the North Carolina forestry community with some actions, particularly how some of these recommended actions in the plan may be incorporated into various organizations' strategic plans. The North Carolina Forest Service is committed to increasing prescribed burning capacity in the state. We continue to offer training sessions for those interested in becoming certified burners. And in recent years, we have hired on burn mentors that can help potential burners gain experience and confidence. We're also looking at ways to support prescribed burning associations grow across the state, including making available burn trailers for their use. This past year, we rolled out a recognition sign that can help identify landowners managing their woodlands with prescribed burning. We obviously have a long way to go to meet our statewide targets for prescribed burn acreage in the state, but some of these efforts, I believe, are steps in the right direction. I did want to mention that there's tremendous opportunities for foresters when it comes to working with the Forest Service. And we employ over 100 foresters statewide, and it's been a great mixture of forest management, incident response, and public service ever since I joined the organization in 1998. We've also got paid internships that I'm very proud to be part of. You can see Kyle Bonnet is our current summer intern for the Forest Management and Development Program, and Amelia Thompson is our field intern for the summer. Anybody interested in learning more about forester positions should feel free to contact me. I'd be more than happy to talk to them. I appreciate everybody's time today, and I'm looking forward to this coming year of seeing folks in person. Take care, and thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. This is Robert Ross with the North Carolina Forest Service. I serve as a staff forester at our headquarters in Raleigh under Mr. Barry New in the Technical Development and Planning. Today, we will discuss the current state of North Carolina's primary wood products industry and discuss some current projects that the Technical Development and Planning Branch is involved with. Currently, there are around 213 primary wood processing facilities across North Carolina. North Carolina contributes around 5% of the total U.S. wood products production. The displayed pie chart reflects how roundwood, saw logs, and pulpwood are utilized to the highest percentages of production at 41% and 34% respectively. North Carolina imports around 299,000 cubic feet into the state and exports 643,000 cubic feet out of the state, making North Carolina a net importer of roundwood. North Carolina's timberlands support a diverse forest products industry. 8 chip mills operate within the state. There are 114 sawmills within North Carolina with an average annual production of around 2.6 billion board feet. In addition, there are 63 plus custom and portable sawmills scattered across the state. 6 shaving mills operate within North Carolina and largely support the agricultural and domestic animal bedding markets. Taylor Stave LLC, located in Nebo, is the only oak stave mill in operation. There are 5 pulp and paper mills within North Carolina. It is important to note that Evergreen Packaging in Canton, North Carolina, is not considered as a primary wood processing facility as it receives chips and not roundwood. There are 6 plywood and veneer mills. Inviva operates 4 pellet mills in Hertford, Richmond, Northampton, and Sampson counties, and AEG in Lumberton is forecasted to begin producing pellets in third quarter of 2021. The state's 2 oriented strandboard plants are operated by Louisiana Pacific Corporation in Person County and Weyerhaeuser Elkin OSB in Surrey County. Capital Wood Products, General Timber, and Coppers Holdings are the 3 pole and post mills within the state. The forest products industry in North Carolina, including forestry and logging operations, sawmills, furniture mills, and pulp and paper industries, was the top employer among manufacturing sectors in the state, supporting more than 150,000 jobs and contributing $33 billion to our state's economy. The forest sector in North Carolina directly generated about $274 million in state and local taxes and $850 million in federal taxes. If we will look specifically at the state's sawmilling capacity, there are 114 sawmills with a total annual production of around 2.6 billion board feet. In addition, there are 63 plus portable and custom sawmills across the state. These are small business owners that typically produce less than 1 million board feet per year, with a combined average annual production of around 30 million board feet. Weyerhaeuser, West Fraser, Jordan Lumber, Canfor Southern Pine, Troy Lumber, H.W. Culp Lumber, and Edwards Wood Products are the state's top producers, producing over half of the total sawmilling production. North Carolina's plywood, veneer, and OSB industry consists of 8 facilities spread across the state with a combined annual production of around 589 million square feet. North Carolina's 5 pulp and paper manufacturers consume around 10 million tons annually. Eastern pulp and paper mills have shifted to global export market pulp with slimmer profit margins. North Carolina contains 4 pellet mills, which are operated by Enviva. Annual production is around 2.3 million metric tons. Top destinations are the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Japan. In mid-2021, AEG, or Active Energy Group, plans to begin producing an industrial fuel and energy pellet. Some ongoing projects in marketing and utilization. The Timber Production Output Survey has been conducted since 1961 and provides estimates of the amount and source of wood receipts, annual timber product drain, and to determine interstate and cross-regional movement of industrial roundwood. The North Carolina Forest Products Assessment began in 1978 and funds our state's reforestation cost share program, the Forest Development Program. There is an ongoing effort to re-educate and remind primary wood processing facilities of the Forest Products Assessment. Primary mills and timber buyers database updates. The primary mill database is necessary for the NC Forest Assessment, and the timber buyers database is popular among consulting foresters and private forest landowners who are interested in selling their timber. These data sets are updated on our North Carolina Forest Service website every quarter, and the primary mill data is fed into the Southern Regional Extension Forest Products Locator. The Technical Development and Planning branch of the North Carolina Forest Service continues to promote the forest industry in North Carolina, and we work closely with investors, economic development, and research. Southern Timber Supply Analysis. This application helps communities, investors, and wood buyers to determine the supply of available forest resources in a given area and to make informed decisions on where to locate wood-based businesses in the U.S. South. The North Carolina-Virginia Industry Roundtable LSR grant is developing and implementing strategies to improve management, health, and utilization of forest and forest industry through market development. The North Carolina Forest Service is promoting the state's commercial firewood industry through workshops and outreach in coordination with the state of Virginia and NC State University Wood Products Extension. Thank you for your time today, and feel free to contact me if you need additional information.
That is all for updates.
Thank you so much, Madison. Thanks for persevering, and I'm glad you were at the helm and not me. I really appreciate that. We are right on time, actually. So without any further ado, if we can get Clay Altizer to unmute and go through the awards, and then we'll transition it back to myself and Sam, and we'll provide some closing remarks and do student door prize. Go ahead, Clay, if you're able to.
Yep. Thank you, AJ. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. I'm Clay Altizer, chair of the Division's Professional Recognition Committee. And as many of you know, we present the division presents 3 awards each year. And then the winners at the state level are automatically the division's nominee for APSAF consideration for the awards that will be presented at the society level at the meeting in January of 2022. The first award today I'd like to present is the Young Forester Leadership Award. And this award recognizes outstanding leadership by a forestry professional under the age of 40. And I'm happy to say that this year's recipient for 2021 is Blair Allman. Blair is a Weyerhaeuser employee over in southeastern North Carolina. She is current chair of the Croatan chapter. And I know Blair was very much involved with the planning efforts for the 2018 division meeting we had in New Bern. So in a very short amount of time, Blair has really stepped up and demonstrated some outstanding leadership. So Blair, on behalf of the division, congratulations, and feel free, I think you're on the call, so feel free to unmute yourself and say a few words if you'd like.
Thanks, Clay. I just wanted to say thank you to whoever nominated me, and thank you for the award. I really enjoyed being a member of the Croatan chapter for the last 4 years, and they're a really good group of folks, and they've encouraged me to participate in everything, and to the NC Executive Committee too. They've also been a good group of folks to work with over the last 4 years. So just thank you. I'm super excited about it.
Great. Well, congratulations, Blair. Appreciate everything you've done and keep up the great work. Speaking of the Croatan chapter, the next award, we will keep it in the Croatan chapter. The next award is the Volunteer Service Award. And this award recognizes special sustained voluntary service on behalf of the Society of American Foresters. And the 2021 recipient is no stranger to the group. It's our own Craig Manzine, who many of you know served in this role for 20 years. So we finally had a chance to recognize and honor Craig for all the outstanding work he's done for our division for a long, sustained period of time. So Craig, thanks for everything you've done, and feel free to say a few words if you'd like, and congratulations. Craig, I think.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you.
Oh, perfect. Oh, Clay, thanks a lot. It means so much to me coming from this group of SAF friends. It just means a lot to me. I wish I could thank you all in person. Maybe next year we'll be together, but I just can't tell you how much it means to me. Thank you so much. Thanks, Clay.
Absolutely, Craig. Congratulations, and well-deserved. And thanks for setting such a fine example for 20 years for this position. And I know I don't really feel your shoes, but I appreciate you setting the bar high for the entire division. So thanks for everything you've done. And you brought up a good point. I really wish we could do this in person, but unfortunately the virtual format is the hand we've been dealt. But I really look forward to getting back in person and actually doing a awards recognition where we can do it in a more proper format. But those days will be here soon. So congratulations, Craig.
Good. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And finally, the next award, the final award, is the NC Division Merit Award. And this is the award that basically recognizes a notable contribution to the profession of forestry. And it's a kind of the Division MVP award, I guess, if there's such a thing. And the winner this year, who will be nominated for APSAF's Distinguished Service Award, is the NC Forest Service's Barry New. And I can tell you, Barry was my boss for 8 years, so I had a front row seat and got to witness all the hard work, dedication, and effort that Barry has put in for the at the chapter level, the division level, the APSAF level, and even at the national level. So I know he did a tremendous amount of work and has served in just about every leadership capacity you can serve in, and has done a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes that he does not get the proper credit or recognition for. So Barry, congratulations, it's well deserved. And, appreciate everything that you do for not only the division, but for the profession in general. So thank you.
Thank you, Clay, for those kind words. And I really appreciate this recognition. It's really special because it comes from SAF and the North Carolina Division. I've been involved in SAF in various ways for a lot of years, and I just want to say that I've gotten more out of it than I've put into it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you all.
Yep, absolutely. Congratulations, Barry, and congratulations, Craig and Blair, and appreciate everything that everybody has done, and wish you the best of luck at the APSAF level for award consideration. And I'll work with you on getting you your awards very soon. So thank you. AJ, that's all I have. I'll turn it back over to you. Thanks for the opportunity to do this, and look forward to doing it in person.
Me too. Sam, I'll yield the floor to you if you'd like to say a few words before we close out.
Yeah, thanks to all, and Clay, appreciate that. Great job getting that summarized, and special thank you to all the participants that earned those awards. Very well deserved. Today is coming to an end just for the meeting, but we do have our business meeting that comes up. That's coming up at the end of this session. We'll just transition into that. Most importantly, I want to invite everyone that can participate tomorrow to Shank Forest. I'd like to thank Elizabeth Snyder, our forest manager here in the Forest Assets Group, for getting this tour set up. And we hope to meet everyone at the first pavilion, which is all down the Shank Road. You'll get a map and content of all that information once we get off this meeting today. Overall, great job, AJ and the team, for putting this meeting together. I think it was well executed. I like the format and feel like we did a good job getting the information out to the people. Thanks to all of our guests who participated with us and presented. Very good job presenting the content and helping everyone to stay engaged. It's pretty long, pretty intense to be on the Zoom meeting for 4 hours, but I think we did a good job engaging people. So thank you again. AJ, back to you.
Okay, CFEs were up in the chat. If you have any issues with that, shoot me an email. I will try and get all of this back together and certificates emailed back to you before the close of business on Friday. So if you don't get it by Friday at close of business, send me an email Monday morning if you need a certificate. Just again, thank you everybody for participating. At this time, we'll go ahead and hand out the student membership award door prize. Unfortunately, I dropped the ball on this part of this, and I'm not able to query the database that I have by students. So the way that we're going to do this is, if there are students in the crowd here, I want you to go ahead and put your name in the chat box very quickly. And based on the number and the order that the students put their names in there, I'll wait just 2 minutes here. And however many names we get in there, we'll do a ram between on those number of names there. So looks like Marley Smith, Madison, Charlie Lane, Cal Oakley. Okay, bear with me for just 2 seconds while I get these down. Let's see. Looks like we have 6, 7. Looks like we have 7 students on the call. If you're on the call here, go ahead and put your name in there again. Or not, don't put it in a second time, sorry. All right, we'll go ahead and do a ram between for 7 numbers, and your number is associated with, let's see here, with the number and order in which you submitted. And number 5 is what I got for random number generator. 1, 2. So that would be Jacob Herr. Congratulations. We will be sure to get that student membership out to you. Hopefully that wasn't too uncomfortable for everybody with door prizes, as it was for me. But I am happy to conclude this meeting and move toward the SAF business meeting. Thanks again for everyone's participation.
Thank you, AJ. And let's give everybody about 4 or 5 minutes to transition, and we'll start this back at 12.